The Amish Woman and Her Secret Baby. Written and narrated by the author, Samantha Price. Chapter 1. Surely this baby will cement our relationship and make him more responsible. Mary stared at her friend Beth. She always gave good advice. Do you think so? Beth stared at her, blinking a little too much. I can only hope. Beth had been against the union from the start of the courtship. She'd told her Damien wasn't a good fit for her, but she'd been silent about that since they'd married. What was done was done. There was no going back to being single after being married in the Amish community. It seems like it was years ago he and I met, and it's only been less than a year. That's what's always worried me. He didn't take long deciding to become Amish, and you both jumped feet first into marriage. I thought he was the man God had for me. Well, he must be, I suppose. I don't know why I need to go through these trials. What is God trying to teach me? I don't know. I often wonder that when I miscarry. I've lost 4 babies in 2 years. Each time I learn I'm pregnant, I convince myself this one will be different and this one will survive to full term, but it hasn't happened yet. Mary looked down into her lemonade, watching absently as the bubbles floated to the top. She almost felt bad to be pregnant when her friend had been married for years and still had no children. Beth continued, It's hard not to get bitter or consumed in self-pity. You can't let that happen, and you don't want to get your depression back. Nee, I don't. There's nothing worse. Damien has a gift for persuasion. He persuaded the bishop to let him join the community and talked me into marrying him. I don't even know if he loves me anymore. Now I fear he's lost interest. I'm sure he still loves you. Oh, Beth, he's out every second night, and when he comes home well after midnight, he won't tell me where he's been. Beth looked away, and Mary could tell without exchanging words that Beth also thought he was having an affair. Beth had never trusted Damien. He was a handsome man, and Beth had always told her he was consumed with his looks and was always looking around to see who was looking at him. That's not good, Beth eventually said. I know, but when he learns about the baby, things might change. I hope so. When do you plan to tell him? Tonight. Mary rubbed her forehead. I almost feel he doesn't deserve to know. You can't think like that. It's a bad attitude to have. That's the only attitude I've got. Did you have these problems when you married William? Mary already knew the answer. William and Beth got along so well. They seemed perfectly matched. We just get along and always have. Mary moved uncomfortably in her seat. It's really upsetting. I hate to even be talking about it, but I feel we need help. He won't talk to anyone about our problems. I think he's having doubts about every decision he's made in the past 2 years, and he's taking it out on me. His decision to join the community? Yes. I have a horrible feeling he'll suddenly just up and leave one day. I'll wake up and he will have gone back to Canada. You said he didn't get along with his family in Canada. Mary shrugged. He doesn't get along with anybody. Maybe the news of the baby will wake him up to exactly what he has. He's got a family. Mary nodded. That's what I'm hoping. I'll be praying for you tonight. Thank you. I should be getting home to cook the dinner in case he arrives home early. What time are you expecting him? He finishes work at 6, so he should be home by 7. Sometimes he's not there until 2 or 3 in the morning. I never know when he'll be having one of those late nights, and if I ask, it'll just turn into a big yelling match. Oh, Mary, this is something you should tell the bishop. Nee, I can't. Damien would never forgive me if I went behind his back, and I know he wouldn't come with me. Everyone thinks he's doing so well. Don't say anything to anyone, okay? Eventually, Beth nodded. When Mary got home, she saw Damien's horse in the paddock. That meant he'd been home for a while. Nausea rippled through her tummy, knowing he wouldn't be happy she'd been out and about. It was odd that he was home so early. She threw the reins over the post and went inside to see if he was ill. "Damien," she called as she pushed the door open. She found him sitting at the kitchen table. "Where were you?" "Out visiting." "Why weren't you home cooking my dinner?" "That's why I'm home now." He sprang to his feet. "I don't go out to earn money so you can go visiting your stupid friends all day long. The bishop says a woman's place is in the home. Can't you see the place needs cleaning? It's filthy." His hazel eyes blazed with anger. "I cleaned before I went out. I wasn't gone that long. Why are you home so early?" He grabbed a dish towel that was on the table, spat on it, and then crouched down and wiped it along the floor. He stood and held it out to show her the dirt on the dish towel. "Are you blind as well as stupid? Does that look like dirt to you?" "I must have missed that bit." He lunged forward and grabbed her arm, and with the other arm pushed her down to the floor. Her knees buckled under the pressure, and he held her head inches above the floorboards. "See it now?" he yelled. Now hate welled within her. She wished she'd never married him. All she'd ever wanted was a kind and gentle man to take care of her and whatever children they might have. "You're hurting me." He let her go and stepped away as she scurried to her feet. "Do you think I like getting up at 5 to go to work while you're living the life of a wealthy woman? We're not wealthy. We've got nothing. You're going to get a job and help out." "You didn't want me to get one." "That's when I thought you were a proper wife. Now I know you're just a lazy cow. That stops today." He walked over to the gas-powered fridge and pulled out a bottle of already mixed rum and Coke. She hated it when he drank. Things always got worse. He sat down on a kitchen chair and put his feet on the table, dirty boots and all. She held her tongue as he twisted the cap and tossed it over his shoulder. This was not the time to tell him about the baby. "This was all a mistake. I thought being Amish was the answer to my problems, and now I know it was the worst thing I could have done." "You wanted to do it," she said, as she stood against the wall with her arms covering the front of her. "All the men seemed so happy. Their wives look after them, but you don't look after me. You and I don't get along, and now I'm stuck with you. I can't even divorce you. I might take you to the bishop and tell him what you're really like." She took a step closer. "If you treated me better, we'd get along better." He chugged several swallows of the drink. "Look, I'm out working from dawn to dusk to keep food on the table. I don't know what you want of me." "Just some decency and some kindness." "Wah, wah, wah, wah." He mocked her with his head rocking from side to side. "Complain and nag, that's all you ever do." He turned and looked at the bottle cap in the corner of the room. "You haven't even picked up that bottle cap." "You threw it." He stared at her, eyes blazing again. "Pick it up." She'd had enough. "You pick it up." Then he lifted his feet off the table and stood to his full height of 6'2". He lunged at her and struck her across the face. She gasped in fright as her fingertips touched her stinging cheek. He'd never done that before. Before she could catch her breath, he grabbed her by her arm and dragged her to the bottle cap. "Stop! I'm pregnant!" Immediately he let go of her. "Excuse me?" "We're having a baby." His jaw dropped open and he sat back down at the table. At first, Mary couldn't tell if he was shocked because he was pleased or if the opposite was the case. Then he turned to look at her with narrowed eyes. "How could you let this happen? We're struggling just to survive. Didn't you think this might happen? So it's my fault? Is that what you're saying?" The last thing Mary wanted was another argument. "Aren't you happy? You said you wanted a lot of children." "It's way too soon. I can't be tied down like that." "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "I can't do this anymore. I just can't. I'm out." "We should talk to the bishop and see if we can sort things out." "You'd only lie. There'd be no point." He jumped to his feet and headed into the bedroom. When Mary caught up with him, she saw him stuffing things into a bag. You're leaving? Sure thing, Sherlock. He stood and grabbed the bag. What am I doing? I can't wear these clothes. He dropped his bag, reached up into a high shelf and retrieved an old pair of jeans and a t-shirt. What are you doing? Changing into my real-world clothes, and then I'm walking into town to catch a bus. He changed into his jeans and pulled on the shirt, dropping his Amish garb on the floor. Oh, thanks for reminding me. He opened the top drawer of their chest and pulled out a wad of cash. That's our rent money. She tried to grab it, but he stuffed it into the front pocket of his jeans. Not anymore. The rent's due at the end of the week. He pressed his lips together and shook his head. Not my problem anymore. So you're leaving me just like that? What about the baby? Your baby, not mine. But it is yours. He stopped and stared at her. Is it? She was so stunned she couldn't speak. How do I know what you do when I'm out all day at work? You certainly don't clean. Her mouth fell open at how awful he was. You can't mean that. Have a nice life, or not, and don't try to find me. Sayonara. He snatched up his bag, brushed his way past her, headed out the door and slammed it shut behind him. Chapter 2. The world stopped for Mary when she heard the slam of the door. Her skin prickled as tears streamed down her face. She could barely breathe, paralysed by the pain of what had just happened. The last few days had been troubling, and despite her fears, she never expected that Damien would walk out on her now. After all, it was his baby too. Paralysed by fear and worry, she sat by the window, looking up at the weak, late afternoon sun, trying to light the pale grey sky. Since it was the beginning of winter, most of the trees on the land they'd rented had gone bare, their gilded fingertips reaching toward the sky just beyond the window. The tears slowed as the minutes crawled by. She looked down at her stomach and rubbed it gently. Your father left us. Now I don't know what we'll do, but I'll think of something. As she fell headfirst into a pit of despair, various concerns flashed through her mind. How was she going to take care of herself while pregnant and unable to work, let alone care for her baby too? The only relatives she had were her great-aunt and uncle, who were barely able to feed themselves, so putting them under even more pressure didn't seem fair after all they'd done for her in the past. Even if she offered to help around their farm until she no longer could, it wouldn't be enough to feed herself, let alone raise a child. Like a bolt of lightning, she was hit with a sudden realization. God could work a miracle within Damien. They'd made marriage vows before him, and she couldn't let Damien walk out without trying harder. She hurried out to the horse and buggy that she'd left standing outside. Damien had said he was walking into town. She could catch up with him, and if she prayed all the way, maybe he would see the error of his ways and come home. He wasn't an ideal husband, but he was the father of her baby and the man she'd chosen to marry. She'd made her bed by marrying him, and she had to lie in it. That's what she'd often heard the old Amish ladies say. She trotted the buggy down the darkened street, looking carefully along either side of the road for Damien. Finally, she spotted him outside a convenience store. He saw her too and shook his head. She pulled up beside him and quickly got out. Damien, please just listen to me. I've made up my mind. But what about the baby? That's the straw that broke it. Don't you see? It's all too much. Now, I've called a cab, and when it comes, you'll never see me again. We're married. We were married in the sight of God. We'll just divorce in a few... No, there's no divorce. Shut up, Mary. You're trying to ruin my life. I won't give up on us. We just need to sit down and talk about things. I'll work harder around the house. It's over. A taxi pulled up on the opposite side of the road. Here's my ride. I'd like to say nice knowing ya, but it really wasn't. Why are you so cruel? I thought you wanted me back. Why would you want me back if I'm cruel? We're married. You're a joke. He went to walk away and she hung onto his sleeve. Cut it out. The taxi driver blew the horn, and Mary grabbed a fistful of his t-shirt to stop him. He had to listen to her. He reefed the shirt from her hands and dashed across the road. She hung her head in defeat. The next thing Mary heard was the screeching of brakes. She jerked her head upright and, "Ah!" and saw something flying through the air. She screamed when she realized it was Damien. Mary woke up and looked around. She recognized that she was in a hospital bed and her Aunt Gretel was sitting beside her. Everything came flooding back. Mary put out her hand. "Damien?" "I'm sorry, Mary." Then she remembered the baby. "Am I okay?" "You're fine," the doctor said. "You fainted, that's all." She closed her eyes. It hadn't been a bad dream. Damien had died crossing that road, and he hadn't looked for cars because he was too focused on trying to get away from her. Darkness covered her like a thick cloud. She wanted to cry but couldn't. When she opened her eyes again, she said, "The rent." "Don't worry about anything." "He had the rent money in his pocket." "You'll get that back, so don't worry. You can come back and live with me and Uncle Joel." "I couldn't." "It's all arranged." Mary closed her eyes. No one knew of her pregnancy besides Beth. Chapter 3. The next weeks passed in a blur for Mary. There was Damien's funeral, an Amish funeral, of course, as no one but Mary knew he'd walked out on her and his Amish life when he'd slammed the door. Beth had located his family on Mary's behalf, but they told her they didn't want to attend the funeral. No one else had any idea of Damien's true nature, except for Beth, who knew a little. Mary slipped further toward the depression that had plagued her as a teenager. How could she be a good mother when she could barely get out of bed? Those and other thoughts about motherhood haunted her every moment. Mary made the decision the baby would be better off without her. Her friend Karen had been adopted, and she'd had a happy childhood. Karen had just gotten married, so Mary couldn't even tell her what was going on. She'd involved Karen too much in her life already. She had to find a stable and happy family, and the logical and the only person she wanted to raise her child was Beth. Mary had to keep her condition a secret until she had time to think everything through. If Beth and William agreed to take her child and raise him as their own, Mary didn't want the child to know she'd been given up by her birth mother. She wanted the child to be healthy both mentally and physically, and saw that as the only way. It was the worst feeling to know someone didn't want you. Mary knew that firsthand. When Mary's aunt and uncle had gone out for the day, saying they wouldn't be home until nightfall, Mary knew it was time to have a serious talk with Beth. Without letting apprehension discourage her, Mary prepared to walk to Beth and William's house. It was more than 2 miles away, and she had already felt the bitter cold nipping at her skin just from sitting by the window. 2 miles was not far by buggy, but on foot, and in this weather, it seemed a fair distance. Despite all the reasons it was a bad idea, Mary grabbed her coat, checked the pockets for her mittens, pulled her overbonnet on over her cap, and then stepped out into the early morning frost. The few tears that had lingered on her cheeks were quickly frozen to her skin, and she brushed them off with her mittened hands. Now she focused on solving her problem any way she could. Mary knew Beth might not have the answer she sought, but there was no one else that she could talk to about it. Damien had already abandoned her. Would her best friend do the same? It was an outcome that she hadn't foreseen, but the long walk into the sharp wind was causing doubt to flood into her thoughts. Time passed slowly as she made her way through the first large field. Mary paused for a moment, looking out over the vast frozen land. It looked exactly how she felt at that moment, cold, empty, and alone. The only difference was that the land wasn't useless, as she felt she was. As she continued onward, memories of her relationship with Damien replayed in her mind, each as a haunting reminder of what she had just lost. Mary could not understand why Damien walked out on her and their unborn child, but she was sure it was her fault, and now her baby was going to suffer because of it. Mary soon arrived at a crossroads where a small wooden sign stuck out from the ground at its centre. She stopped and looked at each of the names and then headed off in the familiar direction of Spring Road, where her friend's house was located. She was nearly there, which gave her reason to continue, but the longer she walked, the colder the wind felt when it smacked across her face. With each step she took, Mary could feel the last of her confidence stripping away. Beth would be there to comfort her and tell her that everything would be okay, but in her heart, she knew such a thing would never be the case. No man would ever want to marry her, knowing she'd been the cause of her husband's death. And what kind of man would be willing to raise a child who wasn't his? Sure, it happened, but it was rare. Mostly it was women who married widowers, and rarely the other way around. The sun was higher in the sky by the time she reached Beth's house, but it did nothing to ease the chill. As she climbed the steps, her heart pounded louder and louder. Mary paused, almost tempted to turn back around before alerting anyone to her presence. It was a shameful thing that she had done, but now there was no changing it. She had to confess to someone that she'd been the cause of Damien's death. Beth might have the answer about the child, but no, she couldn't actually tell anyone that she had been the cause of his death. If she hadn't gone to fetch him back and pulled on him, he might be alive today. Besides her guilt over Damien, she was not going to be a good mother, and she knew it. Her own mother had suffered with a mental illness, and now she feared she was going the same way. All Mary could hope was to be able to give her child the best life possible without ruining her own. She pulled off a mitten, extended her hand toward the wooden door and knocked, her palms beading with sweat as anxiety overwhelmed her. Moments later, the door swung open to reveal the shocked face of her friend. Beth looked over Mary's shoulder, apparently trying to find out how she'd gotten there. "You walked here?" Mary nodded. "What on earth are you doing walking here in this weather? Is everything okay?" Beth asked as she grabbed Mary by the arm and drew her inside. Once Beth had taken Mary's overbonnet and coat from her, Mary said, "I don't think I'm okay, and that's why I need to talk to you." Mary had trouble looking her friend in the eye. "I was responsible for his death." Beth frowned. "Let's get you some hot tea and then we can discuss what happened. Remember that everything is in God's hands." Mary nodded and then followed Beth to the kitchen. "Thank you for being such a good friend." "It's okay. You know you can always come to me," Beth said, placing some tea leaves into a boiling pot. She gave them a quick stir and then turned off the gas. Feeling ashamed, Mary looked down. "I can't keep the child. What can I do? I'll never be able to raise a child without a man, and what man would ever wed a woman who already has one?" "I know this is scary, but it's not as bad as it sounds. Everything will be okay," Beth said as she placed 2 teacups and the other tea things onto a wooden tray. When she had lifted the tray with both hands, she said, "Come, we'll discuss this more in the living room." While Mary followed her into the living room, she realised how painful it would have been for Beth to hear about someone getting pregnant so fast when she had been trying to have a child for years. Mary sat opposite her best friend. Several samplers with Bible verses hung on the walls. Mary knew William's family members had sewed them. Mary could imagine what the people who sewed them would have thought of her, and whatever so by causing her husband's death. She felt the tears threatening to come back. She fought them off with all her inner strength. Mary cleared her throat and said to Beth, "I knew you'd say everything would work out, but I don't see how this could possibly be okay. I can't raise a baby on my own. My aunt and uncle can barely afford to let me stay there. How could I spring such a thing like this on them?" Beth smiled and passed Mary a cup of tea. "Well," Beth began, sipping from her teacup. "There has to be some solution that we can come up with." "What about this baby's life?" Mary put her teacup on a table and then held her stomach as tears flowed down her cheeks once more. "Mary, I know I always say that it will be okay, but have I ever been wrong?" Beth asked, tilting her head and staring at her. "Let me help you fix this. It doesn't have to be such a horrible thing." "I don't remember. I'm sorry, and I know you just want to help, but this is grating on my last nerve. I don't know how or if I'll be able to continue unless something good finds its way to me in a hurry." When she had finished speaking, Mary lifted the teacup to her lips and sipped from it. When she pulled it away, Beth was staring at her with raised eyebrows. "You're not going to give up. Not as long as I can help. We'll find a way to give your baby the life he or she deserves. I'll make sure of it." Mary swallowed hard, shaking her head as the tears continued to trickle slowly down her face. "I can't believe that I made such a horrible mess of things by marrying Damien." Beth placed her teacup down. "You weren't alone in your mistake, but we all make mistakes. I guess this is one you can't ignore, but this isn't one that you can't come back from," Beth replied, scratching her forehead briefly. "I have an idea, though. Why don't you find another man to marry?" Mary let out a long, drawn-out sigh as she looked down at her half-empty cup of tea. "I'm not a good wife. Damien let me know that more than once." "What man would want me?" she asked, while her chest tightened. "I might have made some poor choices in my life, but I won't continue to make them. I know I'm not in my right mind. You know about my mother?" Beth nodded. "I won't marry again. There has to be another way." Beth shook her head. "What other options are there? You said yourself that you can't raise a child on your own, right? And if you aren't willing to marry, then what else is there? You can't be considering leaving the infant somewhere. Oh, Mary, are you?" Mary looked down and wiped the tears away. I don't really know what I'm considering. I just know that this is killing me, and I'm more afraid now than I've ever been before. I need a miracle to help me out of this, or I need someone to take my baby, someone who can raise the child better than I could." Mary glanced up at Beth, hoping she would offer to take the baby. Chapter 4. It was late in the day, and Mary and Beth were still talking about what to do about Mary's situation. Mary stood there blinking back tears while Beth paced back and forth frantically. "You can't just give your child away," Beth said. "There has to be something we can do." "And what might that be? I have no other ideas." Mary shook her head as her skin warmed with frustration. "I just don't see any other way than giving my baby to someone else. Every child deserves proper parents." Just then, Beth stopped, and then she turned back to her friend. "William and I will help you. We'll support you financially, and you and the baby can even move in with us." "That would be an odd arrangement. My childhood was strange with just my mother, and then I was passed along from place to place until coming here to my grandmother, and then she died. I can't do that to a child. I want my baby to have the normal life I never had. I'd give anything to see that happen. It was awful just having one parent when everyone else in the community had two. I was always different. Being different all my life has caused me so many problems, and I can't let that problem extend to the next generation." Mary looked down at her feet. Since Beth hadn't offered, she'd have to ask the question. "Would you and William consider taking my child and raising him as your own?" Beth looked at her carefully and seemed to search for the right words to use. After a brief pause, her shaky voice broke the silence. "It wouldn't have to be like that." "I know, but it usually is, and my baby deserves the best, even if I can't give that to him or her myself." Mary walked toward the couch and slouched down onto it before looking back up at Beth. But maybe you can. Do you think that William would agree? That's how it could work. Beth's eyes grew larger as her mouth fell wide open. Well, she said, stuttering as she spoke, we have been trying to start a family for a long time, but I just haven't been blessed to give William the one thing he so desperately wants. But I couldn't let you do that. My entire reasoning this morning has been about getting you to keep your child, not taking the child from you. Mary flashed a sincere smile, though it pained her heart to make such a decision so quickly. She knew that it needed to be done. Well, I just don't think that me keeping the baby would be what's best for all the reasons I've said. There's no one else in this world I would rather have raise my child than you and William. I know you'd be such good parents. For a few moments, Beth sat in silence, seemingly lost in a world of deep thought. When she looked up, her face was softer. I don't know what to say, Mary, but if you're sure about it, then this might work out for the best after all, she said, her voice sounding fragile. She cleared her throat. How will the baby feel when he gets older, knowing you allowed someone else to raise him? It would have to remain a secret adoption. And if William agrees, it'll be just the three of us who'd ever know, forever. It must remain a secret forever. It's something to think about. I don't know what William would say. We'd have to make everyone think the baby is mine and William's, but only if you're sure. Mary spoke softly, carefully accentuating each word as she did so. The first thing we should do is make sure William's okay with the plan. If so, we can act normally until my stomach begins to grow. From that point on, we'll have to go away somewhere together until I give birth. Then we will return with your baby and no one will be any the wiser. Beth's happiness quickly faded as she wiped away the beads of sweat that appeared on her forehead. Are you sure you want to do this? There'll be no going back after the birth. Everyone would consider the baby's ours, not yours. Can you live with that? I do know that I can't accept not seeing my baby grow up at all. I think this is how it's meant to be. We should let this be good news, and that's something I wasn't able to do before now, Mary said, feeling the first sense of peace in days. Maybe this was why God hadn't blessed Beth and William with children up until now, so they could take her baby and make the child their own. We'll have to see what William says, and if he agrees, I'll never be able to repay a debt such as this. You'll owe me nothing other than that you both take care of your baby. The child will no longer be mine. She hardened her heart in readiness to watch her best friend raise her baby. Well, if that becomes reality, then you have my word. But perhaps you should give things a lot of thought over the next few months. It's still only early days, and you're still overwhelmed with Damien's sudden death. At first, Mary felt as though Beth was trying to talk her out of the idea, but then she knew that wasn't the case. Her friend was presenting the facts logically. I'll think it over carefully. I doubt I'll change my mind. The decision over my child's welfare must be made with my head and not my heart. Beth seemed reluctant, but after several seconds of awkward silence, she smiled and nodded. That seems fair enough. Right then, Mary jumped as she heard the front door swing open furiously, creating a thundering crash as it rebounded closed. As Mary turned to look at who had barged in so noisily, her heart sank. It was Beth's arrogant older brother, Samuel. Samuel was overprotective of his sister since they only had each other. Their parents had died some years ago and they had no relatives close by. Beth and Samuel were so different from one another that Mary wondered how it was even possible that they were related. Mary didn't care to know too much about him, but what she did know was that he only cared about a handful of people, and those not in that category were looked down upon. In all her years of being friends with Beth, Mary and Samuel had only spoken once or twice when there was a concern about the house she and Damien had rented from him, and when he had hired her to clean rental houses for him. Samuel walked toward Beth while he looked at Mary down his straight nose. When he reached his sister, he leaned over and kissed her forehead, whispering as he did so, "I don't know how you can live in this small place. Are you and William sure my offer isn't of any interest?" Beth bounded to her feet and shook her head. "Samuel, you know how he feels about his work. It's what his father raised him to do, and he doesn't take kindly to your attempts at forcing him to change." "Oh, come on. I understand it's the family business or whatnot, but the man needs to provide for you better than he has been." He threw up his arms as his eyes darted around the home. "This place looks like it'll be falling apart in no time, and I won't be very happy if his negligence causes you harm." Mary sat in silence, thoroughly disgusted by the way he was speaking to Beth. She wanted to speak up and say something, but she was in no frame of mind to have his attention directed at her. She would do nothing to pull his ire and attention toward her. One angry man in her life had been enough. "William does all he can to maintain the house and provide for me, and he does better than I could ever ask. He enjoys being out in the fields, working with his hands. He has no desire to throw working on the land away for a few extra dollars." "You act like my job is of no importance. I don't sit around doing nothing, you know. I understand William values what he does. I'm just saying he could make your lives better if he took me up on my job offer. He would be helping me organise shipments of the goods that are traded and sold nationally. He doesn't need to work outdoors digging in the dirt. I'm not going to force it on either of you, but if he cared enough about you, then surely the choice wouldn't be so difficult." Mary watched carefully, amazed at how cold Samuel was and how he was belittling William. Samuel's heart might be in the right place, looking out for his family, but the way he was speaking was unacceptable by any standard. Mary found herself a little mesmerised by how handsome he was. It was a shame he was always so rude and unfriendly. "He does care about me, Samuel. We've talked about this before. William has come a long way, and his work might not be as well paid as yours, but it keeps food on our table. I could mention it again in passing to him, but I know he won't change his mind. Regardless, there's a more important matter I need to discuss with him right now." Beth walked off toward the kitchen. "And what exactly is that?" Samuel asked, following her out of the room. Mary sat there in the family room by herself, hoping to overhear any further discussion that the pair might have. As she listened carefully, however, all she heard was Beth's adamant refusal to elaborate on the matter. "You'll find out when the time is right, just like everyone else. But for now, there's a lot I need to think about." After some grunting and a few sighs, Samuel walked back into the room and sat heavily beside Mary. He lifted his feet up, setting them down on a small table as he lay back with his hands behind his head. She wanted to ask what on earth he was doing, but before she found the words, she glanced at him to see his eyes closed. Is he seriously going to take a nap right next to me? Shocked at his behaviour, Mary stood and headed into the kitchen to join Beth. Beth held a glass of water in her hand as she offered Mary a subdued smile. "Sorry about that, but he doesn't like to see me upset, and I guess he misinterpreted the situation he walked in on." "Oh," Mary said, realising that whether he was an awful person or not didn't matter because he was still Beth's brother. Chapter 5. The months had passed by quickly since both William and Beth had agreed to raise Mary's baby as their own. Mary was over 4 months along, and her stomach finally showed proof of her condition. Going along with the idea that she and Beth had come up with, it was now time to put their plan into action. The story they concocted was that Beth was going somewhere quiet for her last months of pregnancy, with Mary as her companion and caregiver. Since she'd had multiple miscarriages, everyone would believe she needed complete rest. In reality, they were going to stay at a small cabin that was owned by one of William's uncles. William had gone there often as a youngster, and they knew it was left abandoned most of the year, making it the best place for them to stay until the birth. There was one exceptionally good thing about the plan. Beth's arrogant brother, Samuel, would have no idea of the truth, and that was exactly how Mary felt it should be. If anyone found out that Beth's baby was hers, who knew what trouble it could cause? After all, the entire reason Mary was forcing herself to give her child away was to avoid such complications. Even Mary and Beth's good friend Karen would never know the truth. William drove both women to the cabin in the dead of night. When they arrived at the cabin, Mary saw that the area looked like something out of her nightmares. As Mary gazed at the exterior of the cabin, she asked William, "Do you think we'll be safe here for the next few months?" "Yes, and you won't be alone. I'll make weekly trips out here and bring you everything you'll need. This will work out," William said. "The winter has passed, and I'll make sure you have whatever you need." "Okay, thank you," Mary said, her fears quietly subsiding for the time being. "Please be safe on your trip back home," Beth said, offering her husband a goodbye kiss before he left. "I'll get you both settled inside before I leave. There's a phone in the shanty at the end of the road," William said. "We'll be okay, William. You start on your way back. I know where everything is," Beth said. Mary said goodbye to William and walked into the house to give the couple a chance to say their goodbyes in private. When Mary heard the buggy drive away, she looked out the window and saw Beth. The pale moonlight outlined the buggy until he was over the hill crest in the distance. Beth then turned toward the cabin. "Are you okay, Mary?" "I'm fine." "Have you had a look around?" Beth asked her when she found Mary by the window. "Not yet. It's pretty dark." "There's not really much to see. It's not as bad as it looks from outside." From what Mary could see by the moonlight, the cabin looked as though it hadn't been visited in ages. "I'll find a light." Beth flicked a switch and a gas light flickered to life, illuminating the entire room. "Let there be light," she said, flashing her friend a big smile. After Beth showed her through the tiny 2-bedroom cabin, they sat down on the couch. It was the only place to sit since there wasn't even room for a dining table. "See, I told you it wasn't so bad. We have everything we need, and there's that midwife in town who won't ask questions," Beth said, dusting off the table that the lamp stood on. "We can get things cleaned up in the morning. Everything is going to work out." Beth had been right. The months passed by comfortably. Now Mary and Beth were outside the midwife's home, hoping that Mary's constant pains meant the baby was finally about to arrive. "Good morning, ladies," the midwife said as she showed them through to a bedroom. "My regular birth helper is unwell. I have another young woman here, and she is highly recommended by Marilyn, my cousin. Would you mind if she assists?" "That's fine if Marilyn says so," Mary said. "I do. You can come in, Rebecca." "Rebecca!" Beth gasped as she walked in. It was Bishop Elmer's daughter. Rebecca was surprised to see them and then looked down at Mary's belly. This is a surprise. In more ways than one," Mary said. "I'm having it, but Beth is raising the child. This was to be a secret. That's why we didn't use Marilyn, the community midwife." Mary looked at Marilyn's cousin, who they'd already sworn to secrecy. Then Mary suddenly sobbed loudly. Rebecca rushed to her. "Mary, it's okay. I've been doing this for a year and I've had to keep more than one secret. It's your secret to keep, not mine to tell. Don't worry, you can trust me." "And me," the midwife said. "Don't upset yourself, Mary." "Really?" Beth asked Rebecca. "You'll not say anything?" "No, I'll take this to my grave." "Thank you, Rebecca." The midwife then ordered Mary to lie down, and after touching her stomach to feel her contractions, she said, "You should stay here. Don't go home. Your baby's coming later today. I'll keep coming in to check on you." The midwife quickly disappeared, and Rebecca stayed with them. "I can't believe it's finally happening. Do you hope it's a girl or a boy?" Mary asked, trying to breathe through the overwhelming pain she was experiencing. It was a repeat of a conversation they'd had many times before, but Mary had to talk about something. "William and I don't care. We just want to complete our family. One child, boy or girl, would be enough for us." Mary hid her envy. Why hadn't things worked out for her? The friends had often commented that one had the husband and one would soon have the child. What was God trying to teach the two of them when most women their age had husbands and had no trouble having babies? As they sat and talked that day, the pains grew worse until Mary screamed in agony. Rebecca hurried to get the midwife. When the contractions stalled, the midwife informed Mary it would soon be time to push. Mary was soon overcome by a different kind of pain. After 20 minutes of pushing, cries sounded in Mary's ears. It was a relief. The baby was alive and the birthing was over. The midwife placed the baby on Mary's stomach. "You've got a healthy baby girl." Mary's hands went instinctively to her small baby and the connection was instant. This baby was part of her and she was part of her child. She was her blessing. God had taken Damien away, but had blessed her with a baby girl. In that moment, Mary knew she could overcome all her problems. She held the baby, closed her eyes, and felt the love run through her body. She'd had no idea she'd feel this way. When Mary's eyes slowly opened, she saw Beth with tears running down her face. "Can I hold her now?" "Yes." Beth leaned forward and lifted the baby into her arms. The baby yelled as though she knew she was being taken from her mother. Mary turned her head, regretting the decision she had made. But when she heard the soft cooing sound of Beth's voice as the baby stopped crying, Mary knew she couldn't go back on her decision. Beth didn't deserve another disappointment, and her baby would have the best life possible with two loving parents. "She's so perfect, Mary," Rebecca said. "She's beautiful," Beth agreed. Mary turned her head. She hadn't really had a good look at her. Her face was round and surprisingly unwrinkled for a newborn. "She's lovely. Did you want to name her or can I?" Mary felt her heart breaking and tears flooded down her cheeks. Without the baby, she'd have nothing. What would she live for? She hadn't known she'd feel like this. The midwife came back. "There's no hurry, but would you like to try to feed her now?" No. Mary didn't want to bond with her further. She didn't dare to, as she couldn't go back on the decision she'd already made. "I'm going to bottle feed her," Beth said. "Okay, I'll have one made up for you, or have you brought your own?" "I've brought our own," Beth said, getting up with the baby in her arms. "Stay there. Is it in this bag?" the midwife asked. "Yes." When the midwife took the formula away, Rebecca left the room too. Mary looked down at the baby. "Even though she came from me, she's yours. Name her anything you like." Mary tried to smile but couldn't. She was empty and uncomfortable. At that moment, she wished the baby could go back inside, and then she would be close to her again. "Are you certain I can name her?" Beth asked. "Are you sure you don't want to change your mind?" "I'll be okay if you do, and so will William. It's still not too late to change your mind." Mary closed her eyes and knew she had to be strong. She'd given her word they could have the baby. In a split second, all the reasons she wanted Beth and William to raise her baby flooded back into her mind. It didn't matter what she wanted. What mattered was what was best for her child. "Of course I am sure. I'm not going to change my mind." "Don't decide now. Wait a few days until William's able to fetch us. We talked about what would happen if you change your mind, and we're both okay with it, and we'll still be there to support you in every way we can." That sounded tempting, but it wouldn't be a proper life for her baby. "I've made up my mind and I won't change it." Beth looked at the baby and said, "I will call her Lois." A lovely name. Lois was guaranteed a good life, the kind of life Mary had never had. Mary fixed a smile on her face. She was happy for Beth and the baby, but she couldn't shake the emptiness within. Chapter 6. When they had first returned home, Mary and Beth were worried someone might find out the truth. They tried not to worry that Rebecca might tell someone. She had sounded convincing at the birth when she gave her word, but Rebecca was still a teenager and childlike in so many ways. For months, the two women played their roles, with Mary being a good friend of the family, much like a surrogate auntie, and Beth being Lois's mother. For almost the first year, their story unfolded nicely. Not even their good friend Karen knew the truth. Mary would stop by to visit often, sometimes as many as 3 times a week. It was a warm summer day when the worst news in the world reached Mary's ears. Bishop Elmer knocked on the door of her aunt and uncle's house, where Mary still lived. Her uncle opened the door to the bishop, who then whispered something to him. Uncle Joel ushered him inside and called both Mary and Aunt Gretel to hear what the bishop had to say. "I've got news, and it will affect you most, Mary. I know you were close with Beth." One word cut like a knife through Mary's heart. Mary's hands curled into fists, and then they went to her mouth. "Were? Did you say were?" He nodded and opened his mouth to speak, but she got in first. "What's happened?" "There was a bad accident. Both Beth and William have gone home to be with God." It was like the shock of her own husband being killed all over again. Worse even. "No!" Mary fell to the floor, sobbing. Then she looked up and asked the question she was so fearful of asking. "The baby?" Tears streamed down her face as her aunt was now kneeling on the floor beside her with her arms around her, trying to comfort her. "From what we know so far, something spooked their horse, causing their buggy to veer off the road. The wreck was bad, but, God be praised, they'd left the infant with Samuel." "God has spared Lois?" Mary asked. "He had to have, or she couldn't go on living." "Yes, that is right." Mary sobbed with relief that Lois was safe, but without her parents, how would she have the life that Mary had done her best to ensure? Shaking her head profusely, she looked up at the bishop and swallowed hard. "Both Beth and William are—" He took off his hat and nodded. The floodgates opened and tears spilled from Mary's eyes like never before. Her aunt and uncle helped her onto the couch, while Bishop Elmer helplessly looked on. She finally looked up at the bishop seated opposite. "They're with God now, Mary," he said. "I know, but it was so sudden, and she was my best friend in the world, and Lois is—" She wanted to say, "Lois is mine," but the words would not come out of her mouth. There'd never been an official adoption, just 2 handwritten agreements that she and William had devised. William had insisted there be some record. It was nothing legal and nothing binding. It merely stated the intention of the adoption. 1 copy for them and 1 copy for her. More than anything, she wanted to take Lois back. But for what? To live on the generosity of her great aunt and uncle who'd taken her in. What's going to— Lois? Was her baby about to live the same life that she'd had, going from house to house, distant relative to distant relative, and having no one who cared for her deeply. That's exactly what Mary had worked so hard to prevent. Samuel is taking care of the baby. If you'd like, I can give you a ride to see them. I'm sure he could use some company right now. Yes, go see him, Aunt Gretel urged. She'd see Lois and she'd want to take her back. But then what? She earned a little money from taking in sewing, but only enough to pay for her food. How would she be able to look after Lois and have enough to rent them a house? Right now, she had to see Lois and hold her tight. God had to have another plan in all this. I think that would be a good idea. Mary stood and grabbed her black shawl while the bishop donned his hat, and together they walked to his waiting buggy. The bishop's wife was in the buggy drying her tears. "Hello, Hannah," Mary said. Hannah nodded. "At least their child is safe," the bishop said to his wife while climbing into the driver's seat. "We're taking Mary to see Samuel and Lois." Mary paused before climbing up, her mind running at a furious pace. For a brief moment, she again considered telling everyone the truth. But would that do anything to help Lois have the best life possible? Probably not. Mary decided to continue with the ruse that Lois was William and Beth's daughter and see how things unfolded. She could always tell the truth and take Lois if she decided Lois would be better off with her. "Is something wrong?" the bishop asked, peering over at Mary as she stood beside the buggy. She climbed in. "Oh, I'm sorry. I was just thinking about everything. I was just at their place last night. It's so unbelievable that this is real. I think half of me is still in shock and the other can't believe it." Just then she looked down at her arm and pinched hard, but other than a sharp pain, nothing happened. "I guess it's not all just a horrible nightmare," Mary whispered. She'd lost her best friend, and not only that, she'd lost her daughter's security. Chapter 7. Mary had sat down in Bishop Elmer's buggy before he set off, her mind filled with darkness and pain. It was too much for her to hold in, and going to see Samuel and Lois so soon would make it worse. She tried to control the wave of nausea that gripped her stomach. When the horse had gone only 2 paces, she called out, "Stop!" "Whoa!" The bishop stopped the horse and looked around at her. "I think I'll rest today and visit them in the morning. There's no point in going to see them now." She didn't trust herself not to claim the baby and tell everyone the truth. "Oh, well, if that's what you think is best." He pulled down on the brim of his hat. "All right." "Are you going to be okay?" Hannah asked. She climbed out of the buggy. "Oh, okay," she said. "I mean, yes, I'll be fine." Mary took a step back. Fine? Her best friend and William were dead. She couldn't help them now. But was Beth's arrogant brother going to be raising her child now? "Thank you again for notifying me. I'll visit Samuel in the morning," she said again, as a single tear fell down her face. "Does Karen know?" Karen was visiting Jason's relatives on a delayed honeymoon getaway. "Yes, I called her at Jason's parents' place before I came here. She had a similar reaction. Jason said they'd be back for the funeral." The 3 of us were so close. Mary figured it was a good thing Karen wasn't there, because she'd surely cry on her shoulder and tell her the truth. The fewer people who knew, the better. And now Rebecca was the only other person, besides the midwife, who knew the truth. After the bishop and Hannah had driven away, Mary headed inside on shaky legs. Walking proved to be difficult as the pangs of heartache jolted through her body. She was able to make it back to her bedroom with the help of her Aunt Gretel, who came to her aid when she saw Mary's unsteady gait. "I'll bring you some broth," Aunt Gretel said as soon as Mary was in bed under the quilt. Mary was completely devoid of willpower or strength. There was only emptiness and pain right then. With exhaustion coursing through her, she lost the battle for consciousness almost immediately. When sounds of birds chirping woke her the next morning, Mary was still in a hazy fog. She sat up slowly, rubbing her aching head. A bowl of cold broth and a full cup of tea sat atop her nightstand, bearing witness to the awful truth. She hadn't even woken when her aunt had brought it in. Thoughts of Beth and William flashed back before her. Beth had always been her strength in the darkest moments of her life, and now that strength was gone. Now she needed her beloved friend more than ever, but she was never to return. What would happen to her baby, and would Samuel ever learn the truth? Sick of dwelling on the possibilities, Mary got ready, took the tray of food from her nightstand and walked into the kitchen. There she found her aunt making pancakes. "I heard you awake. These are for you. You need to keep your strength up." "I don't feel like anything." Mary set the tray beside the sink. "You must eat. Did you sleep?" "I think I must have. I didn't hear you bring my supper." She sat down and stared at the 3 butter-covered pancakes that her aunt had placed before her. "Thank you." She cut a portion and tried to eat, but it tasted terrible and she could barely swallow. "I've lost my appetite." Her aunt sat down at the table with her. "You must eat, or you'll fall ill after the nasty shock." Mary forced down a few mouthfuls. "Might I borrow the buggy to visit Samuel? I need to find out what arrangements he's making for Lois." "Oh, I'm sorry. Uncle Joel already took the buggy for the day. He'll be back around 4. "I'll walk. It's not too far." "I'll only let you walk if you eat those pancakes, all of them." Mary looked down at the full plate of food. She chewed and swallowed, and, mouthful by mouthful, she got through it. It was nearly 3 miles to Samuel's house. It was still early, so the streets were silent and barren. She let out a long, drawn-out sigh when his home finally came into view. Mary brushed at her clothing, suddenly feeling shabby as she realised she had fallen asleep in those clothes. They were the same clothes she had been wearing when she learned the dreadful news, but she'd had no energy to change. "Whatever. I can't do anything about it now." She climbed the steps and knocked loudly. After a few moments of waiting, the door swung open. In the doorway stood Samuel, his eyes puffy and red, and she knew he had been crying. Sympathising with him for the very first time, she said, "Hello." She immediately broke into sobs. "I'm so sorry." "It's okay," he said, and then he stepped forward and the two found themselves in an awkward embrace. He stepped back. "I can't believe it happened, but now my focus has to be on my sister's little girl. Beth loved Lois more than anything, so the least I can do is see to it that she never forgets her parents and never lacks what she needs." Mary watched him carefully as he spoke, his eyes brimming with tears but refusing to let them fall over his reddened cheeks. Maybe he wouldn't be the worst person to take care of her baby. It sounded like they both had the same hopes for Lois. The difference was he had the money to raise her and she didn't. They would be so proud of that decision, but are you sure that you'll be able to? Samuel closed his eyes and inhaled a big puff of air before looking at her once more and speaking. "I'm not sure of anything anymore, but I do know that I have no other options. That girl is all that matters now. Come, I'll show you where her nursery will be." Mary tilted her head, slightly impressed by how prepared he was already. She followed him into a room at the centre of the hallway. When she stepped inside, the large, spacious area was perfect. "This used to be my office, but I'm going to convert it into a nursery for her. Either here, or I might use one of the rooms upstairs." He pointed to a crib already in the room. "She's asleep now, but you're welcome to see her." Chapter 8. Mary didn't hesitate for a second, quickly heading to see her baby. There she was, sleeping quietly without a care in the world. "Hello, precious," Mary whispered before she gently kissed Lois's forehead. The baby flinched as Mary did so, but never woke. She sure did look peaceful as she slept. The only thing now that bothered Mary was the fact that Lois wouldn't have a mother to raise her. She faced Samuel and said, "I don't mean to pry, but might I ask what you plan to do with her while you're at work?" He rubbed his neck. "That's the only thing I'm struggling with right now. I've decided that I won't return to work until I've found a trustworthy woman to care for her, but who knows when that will be?" Samuel walked out of the room. Mary followed him back to the front of the house. "I could watch her for you while you're at work. I was helping Beth with her, so we already know each other. I also know her routine." Samuel froze in place. "Are you certain? That would be an answer to prayer. Like you said, she already knows you, and you probably know her better than I do. I wasn't able to visit often." "Yes, I'm sure," she said. "Okay, but it will have to be a live-in position. I'll pay you well, of course. With my line of work, it's imperative I sleep through the night without being woken by her cries. Last night was the first, and let me tell you, it wasn't pretty." Without waiting for Mary's response, he turned around and headed to the front door. "I can live here. I can even move in right away." She hoped her aunt wouldn't mind her leaving so suddenly. "Good," Samuel said as he pushed open the door and called out a name that she couldn't hear clearly. Moments later, a young man ran up to the porch. Mary had seen him at the meetings but didn't know his name. His clothes were a bit dirty, but he seemed anything but destitute. The boy put his hand on the railing and breathed heavily before glancing up at the pair. "Yes, Samuel? Would you please take Miss Mary back to her place of residence to retrieve her belongings? She's just accepted the position as nursemaid for Lois," Samuel said, a hint of happiness in his voice. "Yes, I'll take her at once. Come this way, Miss Mary," the boy said, pointing toward a buggy next to the stables. The boy helped her into the buggy, and then they set off with Samuel watching from the porch. Mary wasn't sure how she would break the news to her aunt. Maybe they'd be pleased she was leaving. "What's your name?" "Sorry, miss, I'm Luke." "Hello, Luke." He looked over at her and smiled. "Hello." "Just call me Mary. I feel like a teacher when you call me Miss Mary." "I will, but do you mind if I call you Miss Mary around Samuel?" Mary nodded, amusement touching her lips. "Whatever you'd like." They pulled up to the property and headed to the door. Luke stopped on the porch. "I'll wait here." Mary knocked on the door as Luke found a seat on one of the old wooden chairs that her uncle kept on the porch for when he wanted a quiet moment. When the door opened, her aunt greeted her with a sincere but subdued smile. "You don't need to knock, Mary." "Well, I have something to tell you." Her aunt frowned and then looked at the young man sitting on the porch chair. "How is everything?" she said once she looked back at Mary. "Lois is well, and Beth's brother is handling everything. I have some news. Samuel has asked me to look after Lois while he's at work. It's to be a live-in nursemaid position. I hope you'll understand that I can't say no. I know I should have spoken to you first, but I couldn't." Her aunt interrupted her. "Now stop apologising. Don't you be sorry at all." Aunt Gretel gave her a warm hug. "You must do what's best for you and your friend's family. You're welcome to come back whenever you'd like, though, even if it's just to visit a couple of silly old fools." "Thank you so much," Mary said. "And you're nothing like silly old fools." Mary managed a little laugh. "I'm glad you're being so understanding. Thank you for having me here all this time." "That's fine. Come, I'll help you pack your things." For the first time, Mary was happy she didn't have too many possessions to lug around. After her aunt had helped her collect her things, they headed outside. When they got to the doorway, Luke was already standing there with open arms. "Let me get those for you," he said, quickly taking the heavy items from Mary and her aunt. "Thank you," Mary said as the pair walked to the buggy. As Luke loaded her things in the back, she gave her aunt a hug. "Tell Uncle Yoel goodbye and thank you for me." "I will. I'll pray you do well, Mary. Are you sure you're okay?" Mary nodded and then climbed into the buggy and looked back. Life was changing, and now she'd be closer to her daughter. The ride back seemed to take longer than it had to get there, but maybe that was because Mary's mind was littered with worrying thoughts. Why couldn't she have had a proper life? Most women marry and have children. Why had she made such a silly mistake by marrying a man raised in the outside world? It wasn't completely her fault, but there was no use blaming everything on Damien. She had to take responsibility for her decisions. She thought about Samuel and how he had seemed a bit more like a human being this morning, and his demeanour had been much softer and kinder. Sometimes tragedies cause people to change and improve, but was that the case with Samuel, or was it temporary? Either way, she was delighted she would be able to spend every day with her daughter. When they got back to Samuel's house, Luke turned to Mary. "I'll bring in your belongings as soon as I get this horse back into the stables. Don't worry about bringing them in yourself." "Okay," she said, nodding all the while. "Thank you." "Any time," the boy said, parking over near the stables again. As he tended to the horse, Mary looked up at the front door to see that it was open for some reason. Instead of waiting for him to lead her in, she figured she might as well go and see Samuel to discuss where she'd be staying, along with anything else surrounding her new position as nursemaid. The moment Mary walked inside, a loud voice startled her, almost causing her to lose her balance. When she turned, she saw Samuel glaring at her. "What are you doing?" Just trying to find you to see where I'll be staying. Will I be staying in the main house or—" "You can stay in the main house because we won't be here alone. The housekeeper and Luke live here too, but they both use the other entrance." His dark eyes bore through her, and she knew he wanted her to use the back door too. "Oh, that's fine. I didn't know what was expected." Since 4 people were now to live in the house, it was only fair to give him some privacy. She assumed her bedroom might be closer to the back of the house. "I'll go around the back." "Oh, one more thing. I moved Lois into one of the upstairs rooms." "Which one?" "You'll find it." He took a nervous look over his shoulder back into the house, and Mary looked past him and noticed the legs of a woman in the sitting room. The woman's body and face were obstructed, but Mary could see clean and shiny black boots peeping out from a yellow dress. Who was that? And was she the reason Samuel was acting less friendly? She had thought she'd be sleeping in the room next to Lois. Right now, she didn't know where her room would be. Swallowing hard, Mary followed the house around to the back, where she saw a small wooden door. As she pulled it open and walked in, all Mary could think about was the mysterious woman in yellow. If Samuel had been courting a woman, Beth would have mentioned it since she always told Mary everything. Had Samuel been courting someone without telling Beth? What if Samuel got married? Would the woman be cruel and insensitive toward Mary's daughter, or would she take care of her and be kind? Mary sighed loudly, realising that either option would not be good. Just as well she was close by, because if ever Lois's welfare was in danger, Mary would tell everyone the truth and take Lois back. Chapter 9. A dark hallway loomed before her, with only the flickering light from a lone gas lantern lighting her way. The creepy atmosphere made her feel even more uneasy when she pulled open a door that led to a narrow staircase. Mary made her way upstairs to find the baby's nursery, but as she walked the hallway, she noticed a closed door with a note stuck to it. She was apprehensive about reading it at first, but the word nursemaid was scribbled in bold letters at the top. Leaning closer to read the small writing, she read it out loud to herself. "Mary, this is your room, Frida. Good luck." Good luck? It was rare an Amish person used that term. It was clear Frida found her boss not so easy to work for if she'd wished Mary such a thing. Mary crumpled the paper in her hand and put it in her pocket. She pushed the door open and was surprised to see a nearly bare room. The walls were dark. There was nothing besides a plain bed and an old wooden dresser, and the lack of natural light gave the room a dull atmosphere. It was nicer than some of the bedrooms she'd had as a child, but she'd expected better from such a big, nice house. She decided she didn't care where she slept, as long as she could see Lois daily. She turned and headed back into the hallway to find the baby's room. She found it was the room next door to her own. Mary peeked in to see that Lois was still fast asleep. Her baby almost looked like a doll, peaceful and adorable. What was to stop her from taking her daughter and the two of them running away? They could live on their own, and she would never have to worry about losing her again. But would that make things any better? Mary closed the door and headed back to the adjacent room. She saw Luke disappearing down the stairs at the end of the hall. When she walked into her room, she saw her 2 bags on the bed, filled with every possession she owned. She unpacked her things and then sat on the bed to consider her options. The room felt as though it was spinning as she focused on putting a plan together. If she did take her daughter away somewhere, how would they live? Mary knew she would have to find employment, and then who would watch Lois? If she found someone to look after her, of course she'd have to pay that person, and that would take her full wage, leaving no money for food or rent. The entire reason she and Beth had come to their agreement was because she couldn't raise Lois by herself. It seemed like everything was coming full circle. Once again, she had a chance to keep Lois. All she'd have to do was tell everyone and figure out how to survive. Mary drifted in and out of sleep. Visions of her poverty-filled childhood came back to her, where sometimes there'd been barely enough food. She would cry herself to sleep from the hunger pains. The days of her youth hadn't been kind, leading her to a similar life to that of her own mother. It was a troubling cycle, which she wanted to end. No matter what it took, she wanted a better life for her daughter. She no longer cared about a better life for herself. Most women in her position found an easy way out in the form of marriage, but how could she marry and still stay close to Lois? It wouldn't only be difficult, it would be downright impossible. Unless she found an eligible man who would be tolerant of the truth about her child. A kind, understanding man might not hesitate to overlook such a thing, but where would she find one of those? The sound of horses' hooves outside drew Mary's attention. She looked out her small window, making sure to stand back so she wouldn't be seen if someone happened to glance up. It was a buggy, which wasn't uncommon. Still, she was curious to see who was coming or going. Moments later, Samuel walked into view with the woman in the yellow dress beside him. Mary leaned closer in hopes of seeing what she looked like, but the woman turned her head as a shield from prying eyes. The one thing she could see was the wide grin that refused to leave Samuel's lips until after the buggy had taken off. He looked sad and lonely after she had gone. Why did he seem so fond of this mysterious lady? And did she threaten Mary's place in Lois's life? The uncertainty of the situation was too much, and Mary was glad she heard Lois cry. She hurried into Lois's room and lifted her up. "Hello there. Are you hungry?" Mary hugged her to herself for a moment, but Lois's continued cries prompted Mary to hurry downstairs to find the kitchen. She hoped she wouldn't run into Samuel. She soon learned the kitchen was at the back of the house. Mary found that someone had been organised enough to label Lois's food in small packages. She placed the baby down in a high chair while she lit the stove to heat both the dinner and Lois's bottle. There was also a dinner labelled Mary. Mary smiled to herself, knowing at once that she'd get on well with the housekeeper. Maybe I'll heat up something for myself later when Lois is asleep. Mary headed back to Lois's room after she'd been fed. She changed Lois's diaper and her clothes so she'd be ready for bed. Knowing she always fell asleep in the crib after a big meal, Mary kissed Lois on her warm cheek and then placed her onto the soft mattress. When Mary opened the door of her own room, she heard gentle mumbling noises of her daughter coming from the nursery. Mary smiled at the sound. "Good Nacht, my sweet baby," she whispered. Mary wrapped herself up in blankets as tears flooded down her cheeks in full force. She was fearful of her future and the future of her daughter. Why can't things ever be simple? Her puffy, swollen eyes stung as she attempted to wipe away the sadness. It was hours before she fell asleep, and she only did so after she'd prayed and, as best she could, left everything in God's hands. She'd forgotten dinner entirely. Chapter 10. The next morning, Mary awoke with a refreshed view of the situation. She had to trust God that things would get better. Dwelling on questions about why Beth and William had been taken so suddenly would do no one any good. Mary decided she should be grateful she would see Lois every day. She went to get Lois for breakfast. Pushing the nursery door open, she saw Lois waving her arms around wildly. Mary walked toward her, smiled, and leaned over to pick her up. "Did you sleep well?" Even though she couldn't understand the gibberish, Lois's wide eyes and soft smile spoke in place of the words she was unable to utter. "I was just going to get some breakfast. Would you like to join me?" Mary asked, staring into her baby's face. "Come on, I'll get you something to drink too." It delighted her when Lois reached out her arms. The plan was to make some breakfast before Samuel woke up. It was still so early that the sun was barely peeping over the horizon. Mary was caught off guard the moment she stepped into the kitchen. There, at the large kitchen table, sat Samuel with a steaming cup before him. He glanced up at her but remained silent. Samuel then stood and walked toward her, extending his arms. Although she was reluctant, Mary handed Lois to him. "Good morning," Mary said, expecting a response, but none came. Instead, he turned away after uttering a sound that sounded more like a grunt than a word. Mary stood there, touching the back of her neck as she tried to assess the situation. Why was he so rude and cold? Didn't his nursemaid at least deserve a hello or a good morning? She watched in silence as he whispered to Lois, carrying her out of the kitchen. Finally, he turned around and said, "It's Frida's morning off. I'm taking Lois outside for a stroll. We'll be in the front of the property. Come find us when her bottle is ready. Make sure you don't take too long or she'll fuss, and I don't like it when she fusses." With that, the kitchen door slammed closed behind him, causing the house to echo the loud noise. Mary fixed Lois's breakfast and warmed the milk over the stove. As Mary waited for the milk to heat, her thoughts dwelt on Samuel's behaviour. It didn't make any sense for him to treat her like that. Sure, he had always been arrogant and distant, but now he was treating her like a servant. But perhaps that was how he typically treated his employees. Despite those things, Mary understood the importance of making him like her. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only hope she had for staying on as the nursemaid if Samuel happened to marry the woman in yellow. Many wealthy families had nursemaids, but no Amish people she'd ever heard of. That woman in yellow might become a problem. After heating the milk too much and then waiting several minutes for the overheated milk to cool, she filled the bottle. Mary then fastened the end onto it and placed it on the table. Her mind flashed back to Damien. He would have scolded her and told her she should have cleaned the pot before she did anything else. She quickly washed it and returned it to the stove next to the pot of oatmeal. Then Mary gripped the warm bottle in her hands and let out a long, drawn-out sigh. "Here goes nothing," she mumbled, heading outside to fetch Samuel and Lois from wherever they had disappeared. Mary stood on the front porch, peering out over the land. As she looked out, she realised that her mind was still frail, fraught with worries she couldn't shake. Regardless, she had to play the part of a confident nursemaid the best she could. If Samuel felt the need to get rid of her, then her life would fall apart for the very last time. That couldn't happen. She needed to make him want her there. The gentle wind carried a cold, bitter touch as it blew loose strands of her hair around, tickling her face. She pushed the hair back under her cap, trying to look as tidy as she could. Lois's happiness could very well depend upon Samuel being happy with her. Something told her he needed everything to be a certain way. After glancing around, Mary saw movement in the distance. She hurried down the steps with Lois's bottle in hand. Samuel was sitting on an old wooden bench with Lois clinging to his chest. They looked peaceful and happy together. Mary strolled past some shrubs and followed the path up to the old bench. As she stepped toward the seat, hoping to sit next to Samuel, he held up his hand, telling her to stop. Then he stood and extended Lois toward her. "Hurry along inside. It's far too cold for her to stay out here any longer." "Of course," she replied, taking her daughter in her arms. "Let's get you someplace warm so you can eat," she whispered to Lois, before looking back at Samuel. "Enjoy your morning." With that, she headed back toward the house, passing the garden. Mary found herself admiring the beauty of the scenery, walking slower as she took it all in. It seemed like such a happy, beautiful place. Even though Mary's future was uncertain, she tried to concentrate on the good things. She had to be thankful she was with her daughter. Mary noticed birds fluttering overhead before they settled on a tree branch. As she and Lois walked underneath their watchful eyes, they chirped as if they were speaking, giving her encouragement and positivity. Once Mary had reached the porch, she looked back over the garden. It looked like Samuel was still sitting where he had been. Shrugging, she turned and headed inside. At least he cared about Lois. He wasn't much for pleasantries, but it was obvious he had affections toward her child. In fact, the only time she had seen Samuel show any signs of compassion was when he was with Beth, Lois, and that woman in yellow. She could do without that woman being in her daughter's life, but for now, Mary was happy. After Mary had made her way up to the nursery, she sat in the rocking chair in the corner and held Lois tightly, putting support under her head to prop it up. "Ready to eat?" she asked, holding the bottle to Lois's lips. Without hesitation, Lois's bright eyes gazed up at her as she sucked urgently with both hands on the bottle. Pretty soon Lois would be saying words. Mary wondered what words she'd say first. Mary couldn't help smiling as she stared at the most beautiful little girl she had ever seen. At that moment, she made herself and her daughter a vow. "I'll never stand in the way of your happiness," she whispered as tears welled up in her eyes. "I want you to have the life that I have wished for myself since I was a child. I want you to experience everything the world has to offer. I'll never take you away from this good life you have, unless it changes, and I'll be watching over you, ready to snatch you away," she added, wiping away the pain from her eyes. As Lois continued to drink, Mary thought about ways to ensure she would be able to stay there forever. She had to show Samuel she was doing the best job possible with Lois. After the baby had finished, Mary patted her back gently until several small burps signaled her belly was settled. "How do you feel now?" she asked, her voice gentle and soothing. "It's been a long morning already, and you still haven't had your porridge." Lois yawned. "Would you like to take a nap?" Lois looked up at her and smiled, letting out a quiet murmur as if she was trying to speak. Mary smiled back and rocked in the chair. As the minutes went by, Lois's eyelids drooped until she was snoring softly with her thumb resting against her lips. "You can't have been too hungry then," Mary said to her sleeping baby. Mary wanted to stay there as long as she could with the baby in her arms, but the mess she'd left in the kitchen had to be cleaned. The porridge wouldn't keep and would have to be thrown away, and the pot scrubbed. She placed Lois in the crib and then patted her back to ensure she wouldn't wake. Mary stepped out of the room and hurried to grab a bite to eat and clean the kitchen before Samuel saw the mess. The rest of the day, Samuel kept his distance from the house. Mary hadn't seen him since she met him in the garden earlier that morning. Mary had enjoyed the day with her daughter, and now it was approaching dinner time. "Let's go down to the kitchen to see if we can find Frida," she whispered to Lois. When she walked in, she saw Frida hard at work in the kitchen. "Oh, there you are," Frida said with a smile. "Hello, I'm Mary." "And I'm Frida. Please take a seat. Mr. Kaufman will be dining alone in the dining room as usual, and you and Lois can join me here." Frida had made some of her favourites, mashed potatoes and gravy, fresh bread, and even some type of fowl, but Frida refused to give away her recipes. "It's a family secret, and for the last time that's all I can say," Frida smirked. "And besides, you might not like it if you knew." Mary's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" Frida glared back at her with the most serious look she had ever seen. Moments later, she laughed as she shoveled a spoonful of mashed potatoes into her mouth. "I had you going for a minute," she mumbled, chewing her food all the while. Mary chuckled, but turned her attention to Lois, whose eyes always darted around, taking in every aspect of her surroundings. It was quite wondrous to see how a baby learned about the world. Moments like that meant everything to Mary, and she was so happy that she was there for them. "So, have you seen that young woman that Mr. Kaufman has been wooing? Can't be around the girl without smiling like he's possessed," Frida said, laughter spilling out as she spoke. "Which would make sense, since she isn't exactly an angel." "What woman?" Mary asked, pretending she hadn't noticed anyone. "Oh, the one here yesterday." "That's the one. Her name's Dorothea. He prefers the staff not be seen when she's around, but the few times I met her she was rude and uppity. She's not like regular Amish folk, not the ones I've met anyway. For some reason he seems smitten," Frida said, shaking her head. "She's not from round here." "I think I know who you mean now. She's John and Ruth Hostetler's niece. She moved here a few months ago. I don't know her that well." Mary was trying not to look too interested, but she couldn't resist the chance to find out more about the woman who had Samuel so captivated. "She's a wealthy widow, so I've been told. I've seen it before. Men like Mr. Kaufman build up their wealth and then marry a rich widow, and they become even richer. That's how the world works." Frida eyed Mary carefully. "I know you think that's harsh, and I guess who he associates with is none of our concern. It would just be nice if he didn't expect us to hide whenever she was about. Don't fret about it. Go on, eat up." Mary nodded, swallowing hard before taking another bite. As the world seemed to slow around her, images of the woman flashed in her mind. Then a familiar voice called out, "Mary?" Turning quickly, she saw Samuel in the kitchen. His face assumed its usual stern expression. "Tomorrow, it's important that you and Lois both be ready to leave for the meeting at 7:10. She held her heart. "Meeting?" she repeated, her voice quiet and shaky. "Did you forget what day it is?" "No, we'll be ready." Then he was gone again, leaving Mary with even more anxiety than she already had. "He's made it a point to make sure Lois will be raised as he was. I'm glad he hired you, or he might have made me go with him. At least I dodged that one." Frida chuckled again. "I go in the buggy with Luke. We can just be ourselves." "I see. Just make sure you're ready by that time. Mr. Kaufman can be very particular about being on time, early even." Frida polished off the food on her plate quickly. "I should get back to work," she said, smiling at Mary. "Thank you for the delicious dinner." Mary stood and hoisted Lois into her arms. "Can I help you clean up?" "Leave your dishes. I'll take care of them. I think the little one's ready for bed," Frida said, looking back and pointing at Lois. Glancing down, Mary noticed that her daughter was already fighting off sleep. Lois buried her head into Mary's shoulder, and Mary wondered whether Lois somehow knew that she was her mother. Chapter 11. Mary woke to the soft whines of her baby. Wiping away the weariness from her eyes, Mary headed to the nursery to check on her. When Mary walked in, her daughter was standing up in the crib, staring up at her with bright, curious eyes. "Good morning," she said, leaning down to lift her up. "Are you ready for the meeting, my little angel?" Just as the words left her lips, Mary glanced at the clock to see that it was already 12 minutes to 7. That meant she had only 22 minutes to feed and change Lois on top of getting herself ready. Mary changed Lois's diaper and her clothes. She popped Lois back into the crib so that she could get herself dressed. There wasn't enough time for her to press her clothes or worry about her hair, so she just threw on the least wrinkled attire she had. Without time to brush out her hair, she wound it on top of her head and fastened it with pins and then placed on her cap. Then Mary rushed to the kitchen to make Lois a bottle. Frida was nowhere in sight, so there was no one to help her. While she heated the milk, she made Lois some breakfast. After she had poured the milk into the bottle, she rushed back to the nursery to get Lois. Once back in the kitchen with Lois, Mary glanced up at the clock and saw she had 2 minutes to go before it was time to leave. Mary let out a loud sigh of relief, realising that she'd made it in time. In 2 minutes, Lois would have food in her tummy, and she could have her bottle on the way to the church. Just then, Samuel walked into the kitchen. He looked at her with a scowl on his face. "Didn't I ask you to be ready?" "I'm nearly ready. Lois just needs a couple more mouthfuls of food, and she can have her bottle on the way." "I'm not worried about her right now," he replied, his voice growing louder as irritation invaded his tone. "You look an unsightly mess. Your dress hasn't been pressed, and your hair is poking out at the back of your cap. Go and fix yourself. I won't be seen in public with you looking like that," he added, shaking his head as he took Lois from her. "I'll feed her. Just see what you can do in the least amount of time, please." She knew he was right. If she'd had enough time, she would have ironed her dress and fixed her hair properly. "I'm so sorry. I woke up late and I've been trying to get everything done. I thought—" Her late husband had been right to scold her. She was lazy and never on time for anything. She had to try harder and do better, starting with using an alarm clock. "Whatever it is, you thought wrong. Please, go make yourself look presentable. I can't show up to the meeting with you looking like that," he said, sitting down to feed Lois. Mary had no words in response. "I'll return shortly," she said, before she rushed to her room. This time, Mary would not disappoint. She used the heated flat iron to press out the wrinkles in her dress, making sure that every wrinkle was a thing of the past. Then she unwound her hair and combed it and braided it before pinning it under the nicest prayer cap she owned. When Mary walked back into the kitchen, she told herself to smile. "I'm ready now, I hope," she said, smiling brightly at Samuel, who was holding Lois in his arms. Samuel looked up at her and nodded his head. "Well, that'll have to do. Come now, we're already late." He ushered her and the baby out to the waiting buggy. The ride to the meeting was bumpy and the wind was cold, but all Mary could think about was Dorothea. Would she be there too? Was that the reason Samuel was being so rude and particular? It has to be, she told herself. It's all about his lady friend. Dorothea was beautiful, and even though Mary had been given similar compliments in her lifetime, she knew Samuel had higher standards than most. Mary could only imagine how remarkable Dorothea really was. The thought of seeing her at the meeting made the prospect even more terrifying. Then she realised she had more to concern herself with than a seemingly perfect woman. Mary held Lois tightly, smiling whenever she glanced down at her to avoid letting her baby feel her sadness. It wasn't Mary's fault she had been born into poverty with only an unstable mother to raise her in the early part of her life. Did that make her a bad person? She didn't think so, but it was still a powerful enough reason that she wanted a different life for her baby. Looking down at Lois one last time when the buggy came to a halt, Mary wished that she could freeze that moment and hold on to it forever. Any minute with Lois could be the last. She had to enjoy all the time with her daughter because Samuel had the power to terminate her employment at any moment. It gave Mary a jolt of anxiety to think about that. If that happened, she'd have another life-changing decision to make. Would she then tell everyone that Lois was hers? "We're here. Follow my lead and don't speak unless spoken to, please," Samuel said, climbing down from the buggy. He then walked over to Mary's side and helped her down before placing Lois gently into her arms. "We're so late that the service has already begun. Don't interrupt anything." Mary frowned, wishing he didn't feel the need to point out such obvious things as though she were a child. Samuel made his way up the steps to the house where the meeting was being held. Pushing his way in, he held the door just long enough for Mary to catch up and step inside. They walked closely together, and he sat on the men's side and she sat in the women's section. Samuel turned and offered Mary a sharp glance before turning to the front to listen to the sermon. Mary mentally sighed to herself and looked down at Lois, who was falling asleep in her arms. With nothing to do but listen, she took in everything the preacher said. From the few subjects he discussed, though, one stood out far above the rest. It was the story of Moses, how as a baby he was sent down a river in a basket to avoid certain death. Moses' sister Miriam watched over the basket, hoping that someone would save him. When Pharaoh's daughter walked up to wash in the river, she noticed the child, rescued him, and took him in as her own. At Miriam's suggestion, the princess took on a Hebrew wet nurse who happened, thanks to Miriam's quick thinking, to be Miriam and Moses' own mother. Mary knew exactly how Moses' mother would have felt. Happy to see her baby, but aware the child would never really be called her own. As difficult as it must have been for Moses' mother, she knew that seeing her baby grow up with a better life was worth her own torment and pain. It was something that Mary could relate to all too well. "Excuse me?" Samuel asked, waving his hand in front of her face. She saw that the service was over and everyone was moving out of their seats. "Sorry," Mary said. "I was just thinking about the story of Moses. It's rather inspiring." "Most of the stories in the Bible are," Samuel replied dryly. "I have some friends that I typically talk to during the meal. I'll collect you and Lois when I'm ready to go." Mary nodded, her lips pursed together tightly in a show of obedience. As the house emptied, Mary watched as clusters and groups formed around the front of the building. The level of chatter went from a quiet buzz to extremely loud. Even Lois seemed put off by it, whining for the first time all morning. Her aunt and uncle weren't there, but they weren't regular attendees, so that was nothing unusual. Samuel glared at her and shook his head. It was the baby. He wanted her to make Lois stop crying. Mary held her securely and swayed her, singing softly into her ear. Lois quieted, but not before she had drawn attention their way. "Who's that?" said one of the men in Samuel's group. He was a stranger, a fine-looking man who wore a well-made suit. "That's just Lois's nursemaid," Samuel said, stepping back in front of the man and blocking his view. Mary could no longer see him, but she wanted to know if they were still discussing her. Stepping a bit closer while continuing to rock Lois in her arms, she was able to hear at least one more question that pertained to her. "Tell me the truth. Is that girl more than just a nursemaid to you?" "What? Certainly not," Samuel replied, his voice much louder than the other man. Right then, Mary froze, curious as to why the thought seemed so repulsive to him. "Well, if you're not interested in a girl who's that beautiful, then I shall look forward to seeing more of her." Mary tried to get a better look at the man who was speaking. Who was he? "Trevor, I assure you she's just Lois's nursemaid," Samuel said, his tone revealing his impatience. Mary swallowed hard, upset that his sister's close friend was nothing more than a servant in his eyes. "You need to open your eyes," Trevor replied, laughing as he spoke. "Or better yet, maybe you should keep them closed so I can call on her." Samuel appeared to stutter, his voice weak for the first time. "Well, you're free to do as you wish. I can't agree with you on every point, can I? She's very busy, and I doubt she'd be interested in you." Trevor placed his hands on his hips. "You really don't see her as anything else?" Samuel grumbled something with irritation. Mary couldn't hear what he said. "All right then, so you won't be upset if I talk with her now?" Trevor said. Mary looked up and saw Samuel shrug and Trevor heading toward her. Chapter 12. Mary waited for Samuel's friend to approach. "Excuse me," Trevor said. She smiled at the handsome man, and then he stopped in front of her. "I hope I'm not a bother, but my name is Trevor Hills. I'm a friend of Samuel." "Oh," she replied. "Hello, I'm Mary O'Connor." Damien's last name caught in her throat. It always brought back so many awful memories. "I saw you over here by yourself and felt compelled to introduce myself," Trevor said, giving a quick glance back at Samuel. He then looked directly into her eyes. "I hope you don't think I'm too forward, not waiting for a proper introduction." Mary knew right away he was attracted to her. Trevor seemed like a nice man. He's nothing like Samuel, at least, she thought. She noticed Trevor's gaze had dropped to Lois. "Oh, and this is Lois." "I've met Lois already. She has the same lively eyes as you." Mary gave a nervous giggle. No one had ever pointed out their eyes shared the same blue shade, but Mary noticed many similarities in their appearance. "Beautiful," he said, now staring at her. "If I married a man like him, Lois and I could have a nice life." Samuel's friends were all wealthy from what she had been told by Frida, and Trevor seemed no different. What were his intentions, though? Movement over Trevor's shoulder caught Mary's attention. "I see Samuel waving at me. I think he's ready to leave." "Oh, well, if you ever want to talk, just find me. I won't be far," he said, smiling as he turned away. Marrying him would not only free her from Samuel, it would also ensure she got to raise her daughter free from financial struggle. The only issue was the same one that plagued her before. She would have to confess her lies to him and the whole community. Would he even want her after he knew the truth? She felt someone looking at her, and when she looked up, she saw Rebecca, the bishop's daughter, and the third living person who knew the truth of Lois's identity. Rebecca smiled and gave her a nod, and Mary was forever grateful that she had vowed to keep the secret. Samuel loomed before her. "What did he talk to you about?" "Nothing much at all." Mary shook her head. "We just exchanged names." "Are you ready to go back home?" Samuel asked, his voice soft and subdued. "Yes, whenever you're ready." "Would you like me to carry Lois to the buggy?" "No, it's okay. I don't want her to wake," Mary replied. Since it was the second time that he had shown any humanity toward her since Beth's death, she was genuinely caught off guard. "She must be getting heavy." Mary found herself smiling at him. "I'm used to it." "Very well," Samuel said. "Then let's go home." On the way back, Mary couldn't stop her mind from wandering. Even the noisy streets couldn't help her shake a strange feeling. Why was Samuel being so nice all of a sudden? Did he feel challenged due to Trevor's remarks and actions? Maybe he did care about her in some way. After all, he would no longer have a nursemaid if she married. He could always get another, but not someone that Lois was used to. When they got back home, the first thing she did was put Lois in her crib. The nursery was chilly, so Mary covered Lois with an extra blanket before retreating to her own room. Mary closed her bedroom door and then collapsed onto the bed. All she could think about was the long day she'd just had. Things were just getting too complicated. She had never wanted to deceive anyone. It had been okay when the three of them knew, but with her friends now gone, it seemed more of a deception. Not wanting to give in to sadness, Mary decided to wipe away her tears and make the most of what remained of the day. Samuel had disappeared shortly after they got back from church, but he was a busy man, so she thought little of it. The afternoon passed by quickly, and Lois remained asleep for all of it. When dinner time rolled around, Mary went to wake her daughter to eat. As she pulled her bedroom door open, Samuel stood before her with his hand raised. She jumped, startled. "I was just about to knock," he said. "I was just going to wake Lois for dinner," Mary said, trying to hold back laughter. "Frida has Sunday mornings off naturally, and then she serves the Sunday dinner that she prepared ahead of time. Dinner will be ready soon, and Frida can feed Lois." Mary frowned. "Why?" "I was hoping you might join me tonight, rather than eating in the kitchen. That is, if you'd like, of course. It's okay if you'd rather not," Samuel said, swallowing noticeably. Mary didn't know what to say, so she smiled and nodded. "I'll take that as a yes," he said with a smile. "I'll see you soon then." With that, he was gone, leaving Mary in a state of confusion. What was going on with him? Why had Samuel gone from arrogant and overbearing to being kind, almost friendly and gentle? Hoping not to embarrass herself, Mary fixed her hair and washed her face. After she figured she looked presentable, she headed to the kitchen with Lois. Once Lois was safely settled with Frida, Mary went directly to the dining room. Part of her wanted to eat with Frida and Lois as usual, but another part of her wanted to know what Samuel was up to. When Mary entered the dining room, Samuel immediately stood and motioned for her to approach. "I'm happy you accepted my invitation," he said, smiling from ear to ear. "It wouldn't be very kind of me to turn down such an offer, would it?" she replied. "It wouldn't, but I hope you had another reason at least," Samuel said, sitting back down as she did. "I hope you like soup and roast meats. I believe Frida also has custard and pie for dessert." As they sat together and ate, Mary couldn't help but glance up at him from time to time. Samuel was acting differently. Perhaps he wanted to keep her on as his nursemaid, while also fending off Trevor and any other would-be pursuers. Were those his real intentions? Or could it be he was interested in her as a woman? "May I ask you about yourself?" Mary raised her eyebrows while she finished her mouthful. He continued, "Beth always talked about you and her other friend, but I never had the time to sit and listen. I only heard briefly about your childhood," Samuel said. "The story of my life isn't something to discuss at dinner. I'm sorry," she said, now averting her eyes. "It might not be, but I'd still like to hear it. I'd like to learn that and other things about you," Samuel said. He was making an effort, so she should do the same. Mary nodded slowly and let out a long, drawn-out sigh before speaking. "I never knew my father. He abandoned my mother and me when I was just months old. I'm still not sure why. My mother did her best to raise me, but she eventually got sick and passed away. From there, I drifted from home to home until someone located my mum's mum. She was Amish, and she raised me from the time I was 12. Things got better. I don't want to see another child go through what I went through." Samuel stared at her for a moment without saying anything. Then he looked down and shook his head. "I'm so sorry that you had to experience such hardship. Every child deserves a good start in life, and I want Lois to know how special Beth was, and William too, of course. You're right, though, to think every child should have a good home, and that's exactly why I stepped in to take care of Lois." Mary swallowed hard. Beth was definitely an amazing woman. I too hope Lois grows up knowing how blessed she was to have Beth in her life, even though their time together was brief. As she took another mouthful, Mary couldn't help thinking how strange the whole ordeal was. Despite what you might have heard, I can understand what hardships bring to someone's life. I believe I owe you an apology. I never stopped to think how this might all be affecting you as well. After all, you and Beth were very close, and it's only around a year and a half ago your own husband died. Yes, it hasn't been easy losing the two most important people in my life. He stared at her. And? I'm still far from getting over my childhood, but Beth helped me overcome so many obstacles that would have just destroyed me. I miss her, she said, holding back the tears from falling. As do I, but we both still have a reason to be happy and smile. She's in the kitchen right now, he said, pointing in its direction. Lois can be our constant reminder of Beth and the special person that she was. Mary felt nauseous all of a sudden, but it was guilt, if anything. She felt bad letting him believe that Beth was her daughter's mother, but what other choice did she have? Telling him now could undo his sudden change of heart, and it might get her fired. The truth never had to be told. "I'm just happy you allowed me to help," Mary said. "How could I not? I hadn't thought of it, but when you first showed up after the accident, I knew it was the right thing to do. And now your story has reassured me of that. I have my faults, but I'll not let anyone hurt Lois or take away the life she deserves. Do you think you could make a similar pledge?" "Yes," Mary said without missing a beat. "I made that a long time ago." Samuel looked pleased. "Well, dinner was lovely. It was even better than I had hoped. I have to get some work finished before it gets too late, but we'll talk again." "I'd like to sit here for a while if you don't mind," Mary said. And with that, Samuel nodded and walked out of the dining room, leaving Mary by herself. She sighed quietly, wondering exactly what had just happened. Did his friend Trevor somehow prompt him to see her as a woman for the very first time? It seemed as though, now that she'd caught his friend's attention, Samuel had taken notice as well. If that were true, however, would it be a good thing or a bad one? Samuel might not be the easiest person to deal with, but if she were to marry him, it would solve all her problems in one go. She shook her head and laughed. Why hadn't she thought of it before now? If she married Samuel, her problems would be over. That was the plan. She'd pray and hope that he would fall in love with her. It didn't matter that she didn't love him. It was Lois who mattered in all this. Chapter 13. The day Mary had been dreading had arrived. It was the day of William and Beth's joint funeral. Mary knew Karen would be just as distressed as she. It had always been the three of them, Karen, Mary and Beth, although she was certain Karen had felt left out when Mary and Beth were gone for those months leading up to the birth. She'd been excluded and they hadn't even told her where they were staying. They couldn't, or Karen would have seen which friend of hers was pregnant. There was no viewing, only a simple service at Bishop Elmer's house before the horse and buggy funeral procession to Beth and William's earthly resting place. They would be buried together in the graveyard the Amish and Mennonites shared. Mary hung on to Lois as she slept in her arms through the service. Rebecca, the bishop's daughter, looked over at her a couple of times, giving her sympathetic smiles. Rebecca had been true to her word about not revealing the truth of Lois's birth, and for that, Mary was thankful. The bishop mentioned Lois more than once, and everyone turned around to stare at the baby in Mary's arms, the child they all believed had been orphaned. When the service was over, the bishop's Aunt Agatha walked over to her. "Is she getting heavy?" "A little." Agatha stretched out her arms. I'll take her from you. No, she's fine. I'm sorry for your loss. Beth was a good friend of yours. Mary nodded. She was. I miss her terribly. Agatha looked down at Lois and then back up at Mary. Have you noticed the baby has exactly your hair colour? I don't think it's the same. No one had ever mentioned they shared the same red hair or the same fair skin. Aunt Agatha was not going to be dismissed so easily. Neither William or Beth, they both had dark hair. Yes, so someone way back in both of their families must have had red hair. Excuse me, Agatha, I need to talk with someone. She headed away from her and caught up with Karen. There you are. I saw you and then I lost you, Karen said, leaning forward to give her a sideways hug, mindful of the baby. I'm looking after Lois now, Mary said. Yes, I heard. How's it working out with Samuel? Karen grimaced. Mary whispered, He's not so bad when you get to know him. That's what Beth always used to say. They both looked back at the two wooden coffins. I guess we should say something to William's relatives. I think the only relatives of his are that man and woman over there, Karen said. I'll come with you. After they spoke to William's relations, learning that they were his aunt and uncle from a community in Michigan, it was time to go to the gravesite. Once Mary got out of Samuel's buggy, he insisted on carrying the baby. She stood and stared after them as they headed to the graves. She needed to hold on to Lois for comfort. Then an arm looped around hers. It was Frida, who'd been travelling in the buggy with them. Come along. I know she was your best friend. I'll be your strength. Lean on me. Thank you, Frida. Together they followed the crowd to the freshly dug side-by-side graves. Karen found Mary again and stood on her other side. Mary looked over at her baby in Samuel's arms. Lois wasn't far away, and no matter how bad things had been for her, Mary thought, God had always made sure she'd had friends close by. She prayed the same would be true for her daughter. Mary looked at the coffins now being lowered into the ground. All William and Beth had wanted was a child, and she'd allowed them to have that in the last months of their lives. Chapter 14. The weeks after the funeral raced by, and Mary had joined Samuel every night for dinner. This particular night, when Mary walked into the dining room, Samuel had a peculiar smile on his handsome face. She was curious to know what was on his mind. Good evening. Samuel stood as he motioned for her to join him. I'm growing rather fond of your company, he added, sitting back down after she had done so. Now seated across from him, Mary couldn't help notice how much more handsome he was when he had a pleasant expression on his face rather than a scowl or his usual stern facade. I'm enjoying yours as well, she replied, unsure of how else to respond. How has Lois been today? He asked while offering her some mashed potatoes from a centre serving bowl. I've been so busy I barely get to see her. I'm starting to see why William kept rejecting my job offers. He shook his head. We had another good day, Mary said, and she's still so small. You have plenty of time to be with her more. She already cries when you leave the room, so that's a sign, I think. Samuel stared at her dumbfounded, and then his lips turned upward at the corners. She cries for me? I really do need to make more time. He paused briefly. I'm so happy that we both have you, Mary. Mary sat there, almost paralysed by the surprise admission. It wasn't only the first time someone had acknowledged her importance, it was also the first time Samuel had been so honest and open around her. His words seemed sincere enough, but it was the tone of his voice that made her believe him. As she sat there, Mary thought about Trevor again. Even if the attention Trevor had given her had been the reason for Samuel's sudden change of heart, it was leading them in a good direction. It confirmed to her that marrying him was her answer. The dinner continued with light-hearted conversation. The more time they spent together, the harder it was for Mary to see him as Beth's rude brother. Now he was showing her the man he truly was, and that was nothing like she had thought. "Well, before this dinner ends, I'd like to ask you something personal, if I might." Samuel gently placed his cup onto the table. Mary finished chewing and nodded. "Of course," she replied, trying her best to avoid her usual worries. "I've done a lot of thinking recently, and I was wondering what your thoughts are on marriage," Samuel said, tilting his head as he awaited her response. Mary's eyes grew wide and her heart pumped wildly. She controlled her breathing before she spoke. "Well, I haven't thought about it much, being a widow." She was delighted it was all happening so fast. "I've resigned myself to being a nursemaid and taking care of Lois, but I could always change my mind for the right man." She gave him a flirtatious smile, enjoying the moment. She didn't want to show how eager she was by agreeing right away. Samuel leaned back in his chair and smiled at her. "Well, you might like this idea." Samuel then leaned forward and placed both elbows on the table and interlocked his fingers before continuing. "I have an idea for the perfect arrangement. I've always intended on getting married, but it never happened. I suppose the time wasn't right, or whatnot. Perhaps it was I never met a girl who made me want to have a family, until recently." "Are you saying what I think you are?" She wished he'd hurry up and get to the point. Then she'd jump up and throw her arms around him. "I'm saying Lois needs a mother in her life, and not just a nursemaid. I know I haven't been the nicest man in the world, especially toward you, but Dorothea has come into my life, and now I've had a glimpse of what could be." Dorothea? She was abruptly sick to her stomach, and she had been on the verge of making a complete fool of herself. "Yes, I've been seeing a lot of her. I haven't brought her around Lois because I want all Dorothea's attention to be focused on me when I'm spending time with her." Mary covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh, I didn't know." "Also, and more importantly, I didn't want her getting too fond of Lois until I was certain." "What will happen to me?" She knew that probably sounded selfish, but she had to know. "I'm sorry, Mary, but I don't need two women to look after Lois. Now that she's agreed to marry me, we'll all be seeing a lot more of her. I'm telling you now so you can start looking for alternate employment." Mary gasped. "She's agreed?" "I'm sorry. I'm the one who's sorry." She placed down her fork and put her hands into her lap. She wanted to tell him how rude he was, but then she wouldn't see Lois again. "Has she agreed?" "I just said so." Mary looked down at the table. "When will you marry?" "In 3 months. There's no exact date been set until I speak with the bishop." Mary tried to block the tears threatening behind her eyes. "What was all this then? Why all the dinners and the change in your attitude toward me?" His face fell. "Oh, Mary, I didn't realize you thought anything like that." She shook her head and looked away from him. "Is that what you thought? That you and I—" Why couldn't she have kept her mouth closed? It was another disappointment. She was stupid to think there could ever be happiness for her. Lois was her only happiness, and now she was going to be taken from her once more. "It doesn't matter anymore. Excuse me." She got up from the table, and as she did, Samuel stood. "Wait, Mary." She kept walking, ignoring him. When she was out of sight, she ran to her room and threw herself onto her bed. Soon, there was a gentle knock on her door. "Mary?" "I will talk tomorrow," was all she could say to Samuel. As well as being rejected, she was now humiliated. What a fool she'd been to think that he'd want to marry her with her shabby appearance and her bad history. "Mary, I'm so sorry." His voice was quiet and full of sympathy. She didn't say anything, just wished he would leave her be. Then, All fell silent. That night she tossed and turned, unable to sleep. In the early hours of the morning, she showered and then went back to bed, knowing she might need to be up early for Lois. Chapter 15. After a sleepless night, Mary walked into the kitchen with Lois on her hip. She was surprised to find Samuel sitting there, with Frida placing food in front of him. "Good morning, everyone," Mary said in as bright a voice as she could. Everyone greeted her, and Samuel stood and reached his arms out for Lois. Mary handed her over. "Bacon and eggs, Mary?" Frida asked. "Yes, thank you." She had no choice but to sit down in front of Samuel, who was now seated and had Lois balanced on his knees. Mary sat stiff and cold, not knowing what to say. She had a little time before Samuel married, and she had to tell him she was Lois's real mother. "I'd like to speak with you after breakfast," Samuel said. "Okay." When breakfast was over, they walked in the garden with Samuel carrying Lois. "I feel dreadful about last night. I've been giving things a lot of thought, and I've come up with a solution. I'll find you another position, and I'll give you a glowing reference." She'd secretly been hoping he realised it was she he was fond of and not the other woman. "That's kind, but it's not that I want to work with children. It was only Lois, because I'm so close with her. When I marry, we won't cut you out of Lois's life. You can visit her as much as you want. I figured that's why you became so upset." He was graciously allowing her to save face. She couldn't tell him that wasn't the only reason, so she had to ignore the subject altogether. "I appreciate that, but your new wife will be the one with all the say, and I don't know her at all." "Then we shall all have dinner together tonight. You can become friends before the wedding. How does that sound?" Mary took a deep breath. Women didn't generally become friends just like that, the way men did. It took time for women to build trust with one another. The only women she wasn't related to that she'd been comfortable with had been Beth and Karen. Now Frida was becoming a friend too. "That would be nice. I appreciate that." "Good. Are you happy now?" He looked into her face, and all she could do was fake a bright smile. Later that day, when Lois was asleep, Mary headed to the kitchen to see if she could help Frida. "I'm cooking for 4 tonight. Do you know who's coming?" "I asked and he mumbled something, and I didn't want to ask again," said Frida. "Did he tell you he's getting married?" "Yes, to that woman who used to be here all the time before you came here." "Dorothea," Mary said. "That's the one." He didn't mention to me that anyone else was coming to dinner. Anyway, can I help?" "I could have done with your help half an hour ago. There'll be nothing to do for another hour or so." "Oh, sorry." "I suppose you'll be out of a job when his new wife moves in." Mary nodded. "That's what he said." "Sit down and I'll make you a hot cuppa." Mary pulled out a chair and sat down. She was almost tempted to tell Frida her secret, but didn't know her well enough to trust her with that. There was no one she could tell now, and she had to remember that. When Frida placed hot tea in front of her and sat down with her, she asked, "Do you want me to ask around for a job for you?" "I don't know. I'm only here for Lois because her mother was one of my best friends." "I know. I'm sorry. What will you do?" Mary shook her head. "I really don't know. I guess I'll move back with my aunt and uncle, if they'll have me back. I'll have to get another job. He said he'd give me a good reference. I guess maybe it makes sense to get another position like this." "Do you know Dorothea well?" "I've never spoken with her. She seems shy and so am I." Mary shrugged. "I'm not good with new people. I guess I'll find out more tonight." Chapter 16. Mary knew this was going to be an important dinner. Soon she would have to decide whether Dorothea and Samuel were the right people to raise her child. She had to put her personal feelings of resentment and jealousy toward Dorothea aside. Dorothea couldn't help the fact that Samuel was in love with her. She might turn out to be a nice person and a good mother. Knowing how Samuel liked everything precise and just so, she took extra time over her appearance while Lois was having her afternoon nap. Lois was at a good age to bond with another woman. Mary had to wear her Sunday best dress, as it was the only clean one. She only had 4 dresses, and soon she would need another. Having 4 dresses to wear had been adequate when she'd been living with her aunt and uncle, but now she was more aware of her appearance, thanks to Samuel's attitude. After showering, she pulled the green dress over her head and then placed her stiff apron and cape over the top. After fixing her hair again, she popped on her prayer cap. She was dressed early and ready for dinner, and knew she would have to watch Lois when she was eating. The baby was at the age where she preferred to pick up the food in pieces and feed herself. That was fine, but it led to a lot of mess. And tonight, Mary didn't want any mess on her clothes. Her mind drifted to Samuel. Behind the harsh outer layer, there was a decent and gentle human being. Looking back at her clothes, she wondered what Dorothea would wear tonight. It seemed every time she saw her, she was in a new dress. Her hair was always neatly pulled back under her cap, and her skin was always clear and smooth, not a blemish or freckle in sight. Her plan was to get close with Dorothea tonight and invite her back to the house to spend an afternoon with Lois. She hoped Samuel would be okay with that, and it would allow her to see if the woman showed any aptitude for motherhood. If she wasn't going to be good with Lois, Mary knew she had to come up with another plan. She reminded herself not to stress about that just yet. She had to put part A of her plan into motion, and that was to get to know Dorothea. It was just before 5 when Lois woke from her nap. Mary walked into her room. "There you are, my sweet angel, just in time for an early dinner." A big smile crossed Lois's face when she saw Mary. She was such a delight of a child, always happy. It was Mary's sincere hope that she would always stay that way. After a diaper change, Mary carried Lois to the kitchen. "There you both are. Did you both have a sleep?" Mary giggled. "I was getting ready for the big dinner with Dorothea." Frida looked her up and down. "It looks like you're out to impress." "I am." "I've just cooked Lois's dinner. It's cooling on the table over there." "Oh, that was good timing, wasn't it, Lois?" Lois smiled, revealing a tooth just beginning to peek through at the bottom. "Look there, she is finally getting a tooth." Frida rushed over to see the white gum. "It certainly looks like a tooth is coming through. Has she been fussy?" "She hasn't. She is late for getting teeth." "They're all different. One of mine got his first teeth at 4 months, and another was just like Lois, a late bloomer." Mary placed Lois in the high chair and set about cutting the meat and vegetables into tiny pieces so Lois could feed herself with her fingers. "Now don't make a mess everywhere, Lois," Mary said as she pushed the plate onto the tray of the high chair. One by one, the small pieces slowly disappeared into Lois's mouth as she carefully picked them up between thumb and forefinger. It's so amazing watching her grow. She couldn't do this a few months ago. Have you ever thought of having children of your own? I need to be married to do that. Marriage didn't work out for me. You couldn't help that if he died. Mary nodded, knowing that no one knew the real truth about her husband's death. Sure, the bishop might have guessed, since he had seen her husband's body in Englisher clothes. She was sure the bishop had at least guessed that everything was not right between them. Still, he had said nothing. "There, she is finished already." "Really? Did she eat the lot?" "Yes, I've already given her a bath. Now it's playtime for an hour, and then I can put her to bed and get ready for my dinner." "You're really looking forward to this dinner, aren't you?" Mary got the baby out of the high chair, and as she did so, Lois coughed, and a mouthful of food went all over the shoulder of Mary's clothes, soiling her dress and apron. Mary quickly opened Lois's mouth to make sure she had nothing left inside and wasn't about to choke. "Look at your dress." I knew it was too good to be true that she'd eat and I'd keep the dress clean. Do you think it will come out? I'll try to get it out, but it'll be wet and won't dry by dinner. It has to. Come here and I'll see what I can do. As Frida dabbed at the food with a wet tea towel, the dye of the coloured tea towel transferred to the dress. "Oh no, I'm making a mess." "It's all right. I'll change out of my clothes." "Do it quickly, and I'll rinse it straight out to get that dye out." "Okay." "Leave Lois here with me." Mary had no choice but to change back into the clothes she'd been wearing earlier that day. She was stuck in those clothes for the evening. She was disappointed. When she was back in the kitchen, she swapped the baby for the dirty clothes. "There you are. I hope it will come out." "Me too." Frida quickly took the clothes into the laundry room. "Don't fuss over them too much, Frida. Samuel will want you to concentrate on the meal." Right at that moment, Samuel walked into the kitchen. He walked over and clapped his hands, and the baby reached out to him with a smile from ear to ear. "Did I heard my name mentioned?" he asked. "I just got a stain on the dress I was wearing for dinner tonight." "How did that happen?" She bit her lip. "It's a long story." He looked her up and down. "Is that what you're going to wear tonight?" "That's all I have left." He smiled. "That'll be fine." She nodded. "No one will be looking at your clothes and judging you by them." That comment made her feel worse. It was as though he was trying to be nice about her wearing clothes that were little more than rags. Perhaps she should put some of her wages aside and buy material for some dresses, but her habit was saving money, not spending. At any moment, she could be forced to reveal the truth, and then she'd need every cent. Samuel walked back into the kitchen. "Are you going to be on time for dinner?" he asked Frida. "Always," she replied with a smile beaming across her face. "I might take Lois for a walk around the house." He walked off before Mary could say anything, and then she pulled out a chair from the kitchen table and sat down. "You're different when he's around," Frida said. "What do you mean?" Frida laughed. "You can't fool an old lady." "He's marrying Dorothea." "That must be hard for you." She shook her head. Disappointment was what she was used to in life. "One thing I've learned in life is not to have any expectations. That way you can never be disappointed. God gives us the desires of our heart." Mary couldn't listen further. She knew that was supposed to be true, but where were her heart's desires? A horrible childhood, a failed marriage, and her plan for her baby dashed. "I need to do some things in the nursery." She hurried away from Frida and found solitude in the nursery. She looked out the window at the handsome man holding her baby. Why didn't he want to marry her? What did he find so amazing about that woman? She turned away from the window and sat down in the rocking chair. Why did things work out for some people and not others? Chapter 17. When the time came, Mary had put Lois to bed and was in the living room waiting with Samuel for the guests. Mary was intrigued to know who the other person was, but she didn't ask Samuel who else was expected. "When is the wedding?" "No date has been set." Then it sounded like two buggies approaching. When they headed to the door, Mary noticed a huge smile on Samuel's face. When he opened the door, Mary was surprised to see Trevor driving up in one buggy and Dorothea was driving the other. "Is Trevor coming to dinner?" He didn't answer her. He strode out toward Dorothea's buggy. They talked while he secured her horse. Trevor gave Mary a wave, ignored the pair talking and headed to Mary. "Hello, Trevor. You're joining us for dinner?" "Yes, didn't Samuel tell you I was?" She smiled. "No, but that isn't unusual. He has a lot on his mind. He walked into the house with her, and shortly after that, Dorothea and Samuel came inside. They all sat down in the living room, and then Samuel jumped up. "I'll just see how Cook's doing with the dinner." "How are you, Dorothea?" Mary asked. "I'm fine." She looked down at the rug, looking beautiful as always. Then Mary looked up to say something to Trevor and noticed he was admiring Dorothea. "And are you staying in town for long, Trevor?" Mary asked. "A few more weeks." Samuel walked through the door. "Dinner is ready in the dining room. This way, please." As they ate, the conversation centred around Samuel's work, and Dorothea wasn't saying much. "Dorothea, would you like to come over soon for an afternoon and get to know Lois?" Her face lit up. "I'd love to." She looked over at Samuel. "Will that be all right?" "Of course it will. That's a great idea. You can get to know Lois and she can get to know you." She looked back at Mary. "She's always asleep when I'm here." "Yes, she sleeps a lot." "When would I be able to visit?" she asked. Mary was pleased with her reaction. "Tomorrow afternoon, if you'd like." "I'd love that. What time should I be here?" "She normally has a nap about 3, so what if you get here around 12? We could even have a picnic in the yard area." "I like that idea. I'll look forward to it." "Me too," Mary said. When the night was over and Samuel had closed the door on the guests, Mary took her opportunity to speak with him. "I hope you don't mind me asking Dorothea to spend time with Lois. I had meant to ask you before they arrived, but I forgot." "I think it's a good idea. I think it's a great idea that she gradually spends more and more time with Lois." Mary was relieved. He could very well have been angry with her for making such a decision. "My greatest dream is to have a lot of children, and now it's the right time to introduce them so they become close before she's thrown into motherhood." He gave her a big smile before he turned and headed to his area of the house. Before Mary went to bed, she peeped in at her sleeping baby. She was rhythmically breathing in and out. Lois was the best thing that happened to her, and she was grateful God had blessed her with seeing Lois every day. She was pleased to hear that Samuel wanted a lot of children, and Dorothea seemed so pleased to spend time with Lois. It was a good sign, and hopefully Dorothea would feel just as much love for Lois as she would for her own children. Chapter 18. The next day at their picnic in the yard, Dorothea kept handing Lois new things to play with. "I heard about what happened with your husband, Mary, and I'm very sorry. I'm sure you'd much rather be someplace other than here, and raising children of your own." She nodded. "You're right. Some things just aren't meant to be. I'm grateful for the job." "And what will you do once Samuel and I are married?" She shrugged. "I haven't figured that out yet. I'm not thinking too far ahead." "Samuel said he'd help you find a job." Mary nodded. "He said the same to me, and I'm grateful for that." "I hate to put you out of a job, but there's no sense in the both of us caring for one child." "I don't think of it like that. It's all about Lois and her welfare. I'm just happy Lois has someone to love her and to be her mother. Sadly, she won't remember Beth. And I will love her as my own. Do you think you will love Lois as much as you would your own children when you have them?" "I'm sure of it. It's a funny thing, but I've often thought of that situation. I've often wondered what would happen if I found I couldn't have children, the one thing I want so desperately. I would adopt a child or become a foster parent." "Really?" Mary was certainly glad to hear her say that. She nodded, and this was the most animated she'd ever seen Dorothea. "I wanted my own family since I was a little girl, and Samuel came along. He suits me." "What do you like about him?" "He's so handsome and he'll be a good provider. My mother always told me that a man should be a hard worker, and I know that Samuel works hard." "He does. I think he'd make you a very good husband." Mary smiled down at Lois. Now she felt comfortable with Dorothea. It wasn't that Dorothea was snobby or unfriendly, she was very shy. I hope you and Samuel have many more. Thank you, so do I, and I hope you don't move away. It would be nice if we could become friends. I might need some help with Lois. I hope I can stay in this community, but I don't know if I can. It depends where I get a job. I hope it's somewhere nearby. Me too, but life has always found a way to surprise me. In what way? Mary's gaze dropped to the blades of grass. She couldn't begin to tell her new friend all the tragedies that had befallen her. Oh, I'm sorry. You mean your husband. You'll meet someone else. You're young and beautiful. Mary giggled. I might be young, but I'm not beautiful. You are. Well, it's nice of you to say so. Lois grabbed hold of Dorothea's arm and tried to pull herself up. She's trying to stand. Mary giggled. She does that all the time in her crib. She'll be walking in no time, and then she'll be running, and I'll be running to catch up with her when she gets into mischief. When Dorothea started talking about the future, Mary saw what a good mother she'd make, and Lois was warming to her already. Her fears about Dorothea had been unfounded, but there was one unanswered question. What would she do when Dorothea and Samuel married? Lois started rubbing her eyes. It's nap time, Mary said. How many naps does she have a day? One mid-morning and one in the afternoon. They're getting shorter and shorter, but still, she can't go the afternoon without having her sleep. I've had such fun. You can come back whenever you like. Can I? I don't want to intrude on your routine. You won't be, and I think Lois likes to see a new face around. I won't be new for long. Mary stood and then leaned down to scoop Lois into her arms. Why don't you sit on the porch and I'll bring us back some lemonade and something to eat after I put her to sleep? Are you sure? I don't like intruding if you're supposed to have other duties while she's asleep. That's fine. I'm able to have free time when she's asleep. Samuel has someone else to cook and do the housework. I would love to talk with you some more. I'll be back soon. As Mary was putting Lois to bed, she looked out the window and saw a buggy approaching the house. She patted Lois on her back while leaning forward to see who was driving the buggy. When it came closer, she saw it was Trevor. She couldn't work out why Trevor would be there when Samuel was out. Perhaps there was some miscommunication. When Lois closed her eyes, she crept out of the nursery and closed the door. When Mary reached the kitchen, she walked toward the front of the house to see if she could offer Trevor some refreshments. Before she opened the front door, she heard laughing coming from the porch. She pushed the door open and walked out. Dorothea looked up, and Trevor turned around and jumped to his feet, looking guilty. Hello, Trevor. I was just fixing Dorothea and myself a pitcher of lemonade if you'd like some. Sure, why not? She nodded and turned to go away, and then she turned back. Is Samuel coming home soon? No, I was passing and thought I would stop by. Mary nodded and then headed back to the kitchen, but as she walked, she remembered that over dinner she had mentioned what time the baby was going to sleep. Had Trevor deliberately come there solely to spend more time with Dorothea? He certainly looked guilty about something. When she brought the lemonade back, she hesitated before she moved onto the porch, hoping to hear what was said. She was certain now that Trevor was trying to steal Dorothea from under his friend's nose. When she came out with the tray of refreshments, she noticed there was already an extra chair pulled close for her. She placed the tray down and poured them each a drink. When she sat, she thought she had better fill in the silence. Dorothea and I just had a lovely time with Lois. Oh, you did? That's good. Dorothea and I have just discovered how close we live to one another, Trevor said, smiling at Dorothea. Ah, but when she gets married you won't be, Mary said, and noticed Trevor stopped smiling when she said that. Perhaps she should be trying to help Trevor along. If Dorothea changed her mind and married Trevor, Samuel would once again be free to marry her. But she didn't want to be Samuel's second choice. She then reminded herself that Lois was the focus in all this and not her love life. One thing she knew for certain was that marrying Samuel would be a dream compared to her marriage to Damien. "If you'll excuse me, I think I heard Lois crying." "Yes, you must go and see to her," Trevor said. Mary was gone for 10 minutes, and when she returned, she came back to laughing and giggling, which stopped when she walked out the front door. When Trevor made his excuses to leave, Dorothea said she would go as well. "Do you mind if I have a word with you, Dorothea, before you go?" Mary asked. "Sure, that's fine." They waited until Trevor left, and then Mary said, "Dorothea, am I wrong, or is Trevor showing you extra special attention?" "I think you might be right, but he knows that I'm marrying Samuel." "That didn't seem to worry him today, did it? And he was over here when he knew Samuel wasn't going to be here." "You heard what he said. He was just passing." "You don't believe that any more than I do." Her perfectly shaped thin eyebrows flew upward. "I don't know what to do. I like them both. I had agreed to go out with Trevor before Samuel asked me out, and then I cancelled Trevor to go with Samuel, and now, look how I've made a big mess of things. I feel I'm caught between the two." Mary breathed out heavily. This was not good for Lois. "You must choose between them." "I know that, but it's not easy." "Nothing in life ever seems to be easy." "What do you think I should do?" Mary stared into Dorothea's eyes and was tempted to tell her to marry Trevor. "You must pray and make a decision. It was an inappropriate thing that he came around like that today when he knew Samuel would be out. He does seem a very nice man, and your mother probably would approve of him, but she'd also approve of Samuel." "That is true." "When you said yes to Samuel, what were you thinking then in regard to Trevor?" "I just want to get married, and he asked me, so I said yes. Does it really matter who you marry?" She thought about Damien. Yes, it matters who you marry. She had thought she had the right man in Damien, but not long after they married, he changed. Just because a man and a woman belong to the same community, or even similar communities with the same doctrines, it doesn't guarantee a successful and happy marriage. Everyone is different. Sometimes marriage isn't easy. I know that, but it needn't be a mystery. "Is that what your marriage was like?" She nodded. "I'll tell you something that I've never told anybody." She leaned forward. "What is it?" "He was leaving me and the Amish when he was killed. He was run over by a truck in front of my eyes." She gasped. "That's horrible." "The marriage was a disaster. He wasn't willing to go to anybody to talk about the marriage. He saw that as a failure. He'd decided he would rather give up altogether, and that's what he did. It takes two to make a marriage work, and people need to be compatible with each other. You'll have to work out who is the most compatible with you. It's not about who asked you first. Who will you be able to get along with better? Not just who is the most exciting companion, because that all fades away. Who has the qualities that suit you?" "I appreciate your honesty. I've got a lot to think about." Mary felt she was about to burst into tears. Every time she thought her baby's life was going in a certain direction, it changed. Maybe it was time to take things into her own hands. Chapter 19. It was a week later when Mary happened to overhear Dorothea rejecting Samuel. "I'm sorry it has to be this way. But when you asked me, I should have taken the time to think it through properly before I gave you my answer." "I see." "Are you going to ask what changed my mind?" "No, it doesn't matter." He was surprisingly calm. It had to be awful for Dorothea to have that conversation, and worse for Samuel to hear it. "I'm sorry," she said. "What will you do now?" he asked. "I'm going to go back home and help Mum in her store. She always wanted me to stay on." "I hope things work out well for you." "I'm leaving on Monday, but thought I should tell you as soon as I could. Goodbye, Samuel." "I'll walk you out." Mary ducked away and slipped into the next room so she wouldn't be seen. Was Samuel being cold, or was he completely devoid of normal human emotions? He hadn't tried to change her mind. Mary moved toward the window and looked out at Samuel and Dorothea as they made their way to her buggy. When the buggy left, Mary raced back into the kitchen so Samuel wouldn't know she'd been spying. "Can I have a word with you, Mary?" "Yes, of course. I've just put Lois down for a nap." She followed him into his study. "Have a seat," he said, as he slipped into the chair behind his desk. "There's no need to look for another job. I wanted to tell you as soon as I could." "What's happened?" "Dorothea has changed her mind about marrying me." "Oh, I'm so sorry." She tried to look suitably shocked, but the concern was genuine. He flicked his hand in the air. "It's a disappointment, but I've had a few of those." The statement shocked Mary. She hadn't been aware he'd had hardships. Beth never mentioned anything. "I'm talking about Beth and William leaving Lois an orphan." Mary couldn't have felt more stupid. "I'm sorry. I thought you meant something different." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snap at you. I thought my life was going in one direction and now it's not." Mary nodded. "I know what you mean." "Yes, you've had your share of losses and heartache too, and yet you manage to smile and light up the lives of those around you." "I do?" He chuckled. "I've never seen Frida so happy, or Luke walking with such a spring in his steps. You've brought joy to this household. I have a very important request." Her heart beat fast. Could it be he realised she was the one he really loved? "What is it?" "I want you to stay on here at the house and continue to spread your sunshine." She couldn't keep the smile from her face. "I'd like that very much." He continued, "I would like to keep you on here even if I marry again." It was another blow, but she was careful not to let her smile falter. "I will accept that. A lifelong position here, seeing Lois every day, would make me a happy woman indeed." That was all she'd ever wanted. God had answered her prayers. He stood, leaned forward and reached out his hand, and they shook on it. She breathed out heavily. She'd won. She had secured her position with her baby by her side. Deep down, she was relieved she could give up the notion that he'd ever be interested in her. "I'll do my very best to take care of Lois." "There is no doubt in my mind that you will." Chapter 20. After the meeting on Sunday, Mary walked up to Dorothea to say goodbye. The bishop had announced to everyone that their visitor was leaving. Surprisingly, he also announced Trevor was leaving. "Hello, Dorothea." "I guess you heard I'm leaving?" "I did. Does it have anything to do with a certain person we discussed the other day?" A tiny smile met the corners of her lips. "It might have. Thank you for all your help. You made me see things a lot clearer." "I'm glad I was able to help." "Telling Samuel was the hardest thing I've ever had to do." She looked around. "Where's Lois?" "She's asleep in one of the bedrooms with 5 other young ones. There are 6 of them, all asleep in there. It certainly saves my arms." "I guess you don't have to look for a new job now?" "No, I don't." On the way home from the meeting that day, Samuel seemed preoccupied. He finally spoke. "I'm a little surprised Trevor's leaving." "You finished your business with him?" "Yes, but he stayed on after that. I thought he was staying for you." Me? Yes, I noticed he was interested in you. Maybe for a second. Mary felt sorry for him. He didn't know that the man was interested in Dorothea. The way Dorothea was speaking about Trevor, he'd find out soon enough. Listen, he continued, I know that I've been horrible. I've said mean, unforgivable things, especially when you first arrived, but that is no longer the man I wish to be. I'm sorry, and I hope to earn your forgiveness one day or another. You have my forgiveness, and if you were as bad as you say, I must admit I didn't really notice. That's the kind of person you are, full of goodness, Mary giggled. I hope so. I'm not sure if that's true, but I do try. That night Mary went to sleep contented. Her position in the house was secure, and all was right with her world. It would be better if Samuel saw her as a woman rather than the person who looked after Lois, but she doubted that would ever change. The next day Samuel asked to see her in the garden as soon as Lois was down for her nap. When she walked outside to find him, she saw him pacing up and down. He looked up and smiled when she approached. Let's sit. They walked to a nearby stone bench. I have something to say, and it's rather long-winded, so please don't say anything until I've finished. Okay. I can be truthful and say I was hasty in asking Dorothea to marry me. The woman I should have asked is you. She gasped. Was he proposing? She'd made that mistake once before. This time she would not jump to conclusions. I can see that we could be a real family, all of us, you, me, and Lois. I didn't see it at first, not until my eyes were opened for me. That baby loves you dearly, and she obviously has a special place in your heart. It would be the best answer to all of our problems, Samuel said, his voice sincere. Oh, Mary replied, trying to recover from the shock of what he was asking. He glanced down. For Lois? For you? Or for all of us? Please at least think it over. It was the ultimate solution to the biggest problem she had ever faced, but there was another issue that would follow her answer, and she knew it. Burying the thought in the deepest part of her mind, she looked at Samuel. Do you think this is sudden? It was too close to losing Dorothea, she thought, and he was on the rebound because he was upset. No, I don't. I've come to the age where I know what I want. The decision will now be yours to make. I've already decided that I would like to marry you. It's too soon for me, she said before swallowing the lump in her throat. You were set to marry Dorothea. I was fearful of asking such a thing given our past, but every man makes mistakes. I'll be happy that you're willing to overlook my own. I must say that I never thought of you as someone I might marry until Trevor opened my eyes. Mary smiled. Ah, I was right. He didn't notice me until Trevor liked me. Please don't hold that against me, he added. I was a fool not to see what a good woman you were right from the start. I guess I saw you just as a friend of my little sister Beth. Can I ask what you like about me? Your honesty and openness. It's refreshing. Samuel smiled at her. Marriage to a man such as Samuel might be a difficult path, but it wouldn't be too difficult to handle, and even if it were, the reward at the end would be worth anything it took. If she married him, she could be a real mother to her daughter. I couldn't. Why not? I couldn't promise that I'd be the perfect wife for you or the perfect mother for Lois, but I hope we can both leave our past behind and start anew, she said, knowing how important forgiveness really was. I will work on it to change your mind, he smiled at her. I'll have your belongings moved to a guest room. You'll like it better than the one you're in now. I have work to do. He stood and walked away. Mary leaned back, staring after him. She let out a long, drawn-out sigh before closing her eyes tightly. The issue that was now popping into her thoughts was that of whether or not she should come clean to him. It was bad enough that Samuel was raising Lois thinking she was his niece. Should he be left to believe the lie? It was obvious that his marriage proposal was only made with Lois in mind, which made the prospect of confronting him with the truth that much harder. After Mary had collected Lois from Frida, she changed her diaper and played with her until she readied her for bed. Once Lois was nearly asleep in her crib, Mary returned to her room. She had never dreamed he'd ask her to marry him, but she also never reckoned on the fact that the man would only be marrying her because of her child. What a web of lies she'd created. Collapsing onto her bed, she then stared up at the ceiling and closed her eyes. I should have told him as soon as Beth and William died, but he was too distraught, and then he would have also had to face losing a niece. I can't care for Lois alone and give her everything she'll need. She had to keep the lie going for everyone's sake. Lying there in the pitch-black room, Mary rolled onto her side and peered out the window. It wouldn't be easy to keep such a secret, especially if she and Samuel grew close. If he was truly the nice man that he'd been around her lately, then maybe they might even come to love each other at some point. Sighing loudly, she made herself a promise that she would deal with such things if and when they arose, but for now, only Lois mattered. Samuel's feelings were important, but not important enough to risk losing a good life for her daughter. As sleep tugged at her consciousness, Mary heard soft whimpers from the room next door. Without hesitation, she jumped out of bed and hurried to the nursery. Through the doorway, Mary saw Lois's arms waving around frantically. When she stepped inside the room, she noticed the baby's bright eyes staring up at her. "It's okay, my baby. I'm not leaving you." She placed Lois onto her side and patted her on the back until she fell back asleep. Chapter 21. The next few weeks went by in a guilt-filled blur. Mary's life had gone from nearly impossible to almost perfect. Samuel had continued to be nice, and Mary finally saw the possibility of happiness at the end of her journey. Samuel was growing on her, and he was devoted to Lois. Despite the positivity that Mary felt, the fact that she held a dark secret from Samuel was weighing on her tremendously. "It's all worth the risk," she kept telling herself. That Friday night, Mary met Samuel for dinner. As she started on her soup, she could feel his heated gaze upon her. Looking up slowly, she noticed that Samuel was watching her carefully, his hands folded together and propped up by his elbows on the table. "Yes?" she asked after she swallowed her mouthful. "Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to wait until you'd finished," he said, a faint smile reaching his lips. Mary tilted her head. It seemed like he had something he wanted to discuss, but what was it? Did he find out something that she had been trying to keep under wraps? As her hands trembled from the fear, he said, "It's nothing bad, I assure you. I'm hoping it's the opposite." "Oh, then just tell me what's on your mind. We can discuss anything you'd like," Mary said. "Well, when you put it like that, it does make it easier to mention," he said, worrying her a bit further. Mary just sat there as goosebumps dotted her arms. "I was hoping we could set the date for the wedding," she giggled. "I haven't said yes." "Not yet. I'd like it to be within the next few weeks, if you'd be so inclined, because I want to marry you as soon as possible." Mary froze, overwhelmed by his affection. "I have to think about it." "How long will that take?" "As long as it takes," he continued. "Whatever day you want is fine with me. The sooner the better." Dinner continued happily, but once it was nearly over, Samuel cleared his throat. "I'd hate to risk ruining the mood, but I don't want this evening to end. Is there a chance you'd like to go for a walk?" Just as Mary was about to respond, a soft murmur could be heard down the hall. "Oh, I think that's Lois," she said, jumping to her feet. "I'll just check on her." "Isn't she in the kitchen with Frida?" No, I fed her earlier and put her down to sleep. She was very tired. Samuel rose to his feet. Shall I go and see to her? I'll go. When Mary walked into the nursery, she saw her baby flailing her arms around as she often did. Lois's gibberish filled the room. Good evening, my angel, she said, lifting her up gently. Perhaps I put you to bed too early tonight. Let's go and see Samuel. There you are, Samuel said, smiling as she stepped back into the room with Lois. Perhaps she can join us on our walk then. It's not too cold tonight. Mary shook her head. Samuel must have taken that as a sign, because right then his mood seemed to change. Hoping to avoid upsetting him, she said, I don't know if she'd be up for a walk, but we could sit on the porch. Samuel's look of disappointment quickly faded. That would be even better, he said as he extended his hand toward her. Side by side, Samuel and Mary headed out to the front porch with Lois clasped tightly in Mary's free arm. The dark azure hues of the sky were offset by magenta streaks caused by the falling sun. Mary took a deep breath of the chilly night air. Samuel held his arms out for Lois. Mary handed her over, happy that he was so attached to Lois. As she sat there watching the two together, every tickle he gave Lois and every laugh that came from Lois's lips made Mary feel even better about their future. Maybe it took something so life-altering and emotional, like losing his sister, for Samuel to see life for what it was. He now seemed like the perfect man. You know, I've always wondered what it might be like to be a father, but I didn't expect it to happen like this, Samuel said, now trying to quiet Lois by rocking her gently in his arms. What will it be like when we have more children? We will if I agree to the marriage, he sighed. You're making me wait, and it's not a bad thing. I would love more if we get married. When we get married, Samuel laughed, there are plenty of rooms in the house. Or I'd buy us a new home, a bigger and better one. As I've said, I never really thought I'd get married and have a family, even though I've secretly wanted that for a long time. Now that I am about to have the improbable, I want to make everything as perfect as it can be. Besides, a larger home with more land would be much more appropriate if we hope to expand our family. Mary smiled. Is this how you do business? Yes, you've got to know what you want and pursue it. Once the wind turned colder, they went back into the warm house. Mary took Lois from Samuel, and then they went their separate ways. Have a lovely night, my dear, he called out to Mary. And you, Mary replied. With a smile and a warm heart, she lay Lois back down in her crib and sat beside her in the rocking chair. Staring at Lois as she playfully rolled around and giggled, Mary couldn't help but feel like Beth was watching over them. Everything that she and her friend tried to put together had nearly fallen apart until Samuel opened up and let her in. If that wasn't a miracle of some sort, then she didn't know what was. After minutes had passed, Lois's eyelids closed, and the sounds of her rhythmic breathing filled the air. Mary took one last look at Lois before heading to her room. She fell onto her bed excited, and then she smiled up at the moon that now hung high in the night sky. Moments later, she was fast asleep. Chapter 22. The next day, Mary had a list of errands to run, along with some mail that had to be delivered to the postmaster's office. She also had to stop in and get some groceries for Frida. Frida had an elaborate dinner planned for that night and was missing a few ingredients. After Mary had dressed, she got Lois ready and headed to say goodbye to Samuel. She peered into Samuel's office to see him hunched over a table with a piece of paper in his hands. Next to him was a small, ornate box with a handwritten label stuck to it. A chill ran down Mary's spine when she realised that was Beth's box where she'd kept her important papers. In Samuel's hands was the written agreement between her and Beth and William about them taking Lois to raise as their own child. She knew it was the document, as they'd written it on special lilac heavyweight paper that she and Beth had purchased. Samuel was learning the truth of who Lois was at this very moment, and not learning it from Mary's lips. Fearing what would come next, Mary turned away, her back pressed up against the wall. "What do I do?" she wondered, swallowing nervously. What was going through Samuel's mind right then? Was he upset and angry, or just hurt and disappointed? Either way, she knew that confronting him so soon would never work in her favour. All Mary hoped was that it wouldn't change the plans they had for marriage, but she knew in her heart that it would. She'd taken things too far. She should have been happy to leave things be, with the promise of being there with Lois forever. With no other option, Mary made the decision to leave with Lois without saying goodbye. She asked Frida to let Samuel know she'd be gone for the day. The closer they got to the door, the more fearful Mary felt that she would get caught. Only a few steps away now, she could hear her heart beating so loudly that it drowned out her thoughts. With the cold doorknob in her hand, Mary pushed the door open. With one last look back inside, she sighed, letting a tear trickle down her face. "I'm so sorry, Samuel." Mary looked down at her daughter and held her tightly while walking toward the buggy that Luke had readied. On the trip to town, Mary tried to organise her thoughts. In one day, weeks of happiness had become meaningless. Why hadn't she remembered that piece of paper? Of course, Beth's things would have been given to her brother. She'd forgotten about Beth's copy of the agreement long ago. It was difficult to know the pain Samuel would have now, but she wasn't about to find out right away. Time alone was what he needed. He would undoubtedly hate her, even if he wanted to continue taking care of Lois. It was over. Her chance at a full, happy life with her daughter and a future husband was over. Everything Mary had worked toward was gone. Looking back on it, Mary was so ashamed of all that she had done in her life. Mistakes were commonplace, she knew that, but she was sure she was the only woman her age still making them. After she had run her errands, Mary sat with Lois on a hill that overlooked Samuel's land, watching the day slowly fade as her hopes of a bright future did the same. As the leaves fell slowly to the ground all around her, they fluttered in the sky as the wind caught them in its clutches and tossed them about wildly. Mary watched Lois carefully, worried that the chilling breeze might be too cold for her. "It's starting to get dark now, so it's probably almost dinner time. We can go back soon," she whispered. Lois looked up at her and smiled, but made no sound. She did look like she was starting to get too cold, but Mary didn't want to return to the house just yet. She took her shawl off and wrapped it around Lois. Confrontation with Samuel was what Mary had been avoiding all day. Mary had decided against the option of running away, as there was nowhere she could go. Mary could see the house clearly. The setting sun filled the sky with different shades of pinks and yellows, but the beauty of it left her unimpressed. Mary was too nervous to see the good in anything. "Let's go home," she said as she placed Lois safely into the buggy. On the short drive, Mary found it impossible to think clearly. Everything that she had been trying to keep under wraps was now exposed. Her secrets, her lies, and the painful truth. What Samuel would think or say was something that she just couldn't know. He would most likely be angry, but would he throw them out? Or even worse, would he only throw her out and fight her for Lois? When they arrived home, Luke ran out and took charge of the buggy. Mary, with Lois in her arms, proceeded quietly to the house, hoping to slip in without being heard. When she pushed the door open, the haunting silence made her uneasy. Stepping lightly to avoid making unnecessary noise, Mary made her way to the nursery. Placing her daughter safely in the crib, she lifted the side rail and then stepped back and watched in silence. There in that nursery, at that very moment, everything seemed right. Her precious baby girl lay there, now fast asleep without a single worry. It wouldn't be that way much longer, but Mary wanted to hold on to it for as long as she could. "I'm sorry that I failed you. I'm sorry for everything." She'd have to face Samuel soon. She hadn't been able to see his reaction very clearly as he read the paper, but she had seen enough to know that it had affected him greatly. The only thing she didn't know was the future that it would lead to. Would she lose everything? She closed her eyes. If God knows the beginning from the end, He knows how things will turn out. She prayed that things would work out the best for everyone concerned. Then she left things in God's hands. I will have belief and know that even if things look dreadful, God will make things right. "Good night, Lois," Mary whispered. When she turned to leave, she came face to face with Samuel in the doorway. "If you're not busy, I think we need to talk," he said in a low voice. Mary swallowed nervously. She wanted to say something, anything, but words wouldn't come. "Come with me," he said, before disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. Mary could feel her chest tightening as she followed him. Walking into Samuel's office, she could feel the tension right away. Samuel was quiet, but he watched her intently the entire time. He then walked over to the sofa and sat down, motioning for her to sit across from him. "Please, have a seat." Chapter 23. Before you say anything, I owe you a huge apology. You saw the agreement, didn't you? I did. The agreement between you, Beth, and William. I had a dreadful childhood. My dad abandoned me and my mother, and then when Mum passed away, I went drifting from one foster family to another until the authorities found my Amish grandmother. Things were a little better then, when I became a part of the family of God. But still, I had no close family, and my grandmother soon passed away. She looked at him. Her past was her only excuse for her deception. "Mary, that doesn't excuse your lies." He wasn't going to understand. "My husband died before my eyes as he was walking out on me after I told him I was pregnant. I had no way to raise the child and didn't want her to end up like me. I wanted her to be happy and carefree." She looked up at him and he didn't say anything. "Beth and William had no children and they agreed to take mine and raise her." "Why didn't you say something when Beth died? I've invested my time and money into that child. A child that is no blood relative of mine." His voice was louder now. Mary gasped. It hadn't occurred to her to look at it like that. "But she was Beth's child." "No, not really." Mary could only wonder where things stood now. Was Lois in danger of being tossed away with her? Samuel seemed to be at a loss, just as she was, because he sat there silently for some time. Finally, he spoke. "I'm so sorry for what you've gone through. I had no idea you were holding on to such secrets." Not knowing what to make of what he was saying, Mary just sat there in a daze. She could feel her lips quivering, but there was still no words coming to mind. The time had come to be completely honest about everything. "I saw what you were reading before I left this morning. I didn't know how to tell you. I'm sorry I didn't tell you myself sooner than this." Samuel stared at her, almost squinting as he said, "Yes, I read it. I probably shouldn't have, but I can't take that back now. I just wish you had trusted me enough to tell me, but I do understand how difficult it must have been. My heart broke for you thinking what a difficult decision you must have faced, and you must have faced it more than once. I can't imagine living through all that you have, and I certainly can't fathom walking through life with such a heavy burden in my heart." Mary's throat felt like it was closing up. She couldn't breathe as freely as she wanted, but she was slowly beginning to understand the meaning behind the tone of his voice. "So, you're not mad?" Samuel shook his head. "No, I'm not mad, of course not. How could I be? What you did for Beth and William was the most noble thing that I've ever heard of in all of my 35 years of life. I was initially skeptical when Beth first broke the news to me about her expecting a baby, but that was because I knew that she and William had been trying unsuccessfully to have children for a long time. I know miracles happen when you least expect them, though, so I guess I just thought God had finally heard their prayers. Now that I've heard the truth, it paints you in a far different light." "Here it comes," Mary thought, her posture immediately becoming rigid, getting ready to be let down all over again. "I'm sorry," she said, sniffing back tears. "No, don't be upset," he said. "I'm just saying what you did showed me what's truly in your heart. You've put the happiness of others before your own countless times, even my own. You could have told me right away and taken Lois from me, but you didn't. You allowed me to love Lois as if she were a part of my family. You stayed so she would be happy, and so that I would be too." A faint smile touched his lips as his voice trailed off. Mary sat there, almost oblivious to the world around her. What was happening? It was as if he saw her struggle the same way that she did. Every other man in the world would have seen her past as unforgivable and horrid, and her lies as a betrayal. Samuel was commending her for facing so many obstacles and doing what she had to for her baby. "I didn't know what to do, but I didn't know how to tell you either," she said, her sadness spilling out in her voice. "Do you hate me now? You don't, do you?" "Hate? I don't think I could ever hate you," Samuel said, standing up. He stepped toward her and reached out his hand. Not knowing what else to do, she extended her own and then rose out of the chair as he pulled her to her feet. "To be honest, reading that letter has made me fall more in love with you." She caught her breath, letting her hand fall back to her side. He chuckled and cleared his throat. "That just slipped out." "You love me?" He looked into her eyes. "Who wouldn't love you, Mary?" A lot of people. My late husband, for one." "I didn't know him too well, but I know he was a fool. He didn't know what he had, and I don't want to be charged with making a similar mistake. Mary, will you marry me?" This time when he asked, it was different. He asked from the heart, and she could feel the love in his words. He held out his hand again, and she didn't hesitate to put her hand back in his. Mary's chest felt as though it was on the verge of exploding. Out of every possibility that had crossed her mind earlier that day, this was not close to one of them. She never expected him to be so understanding and accepting. Good things had rarely come her way. "Really?" she asked, her voice as soft as the quietest whisper. "Yes, really," he said, whispering back. "We'll marry soon, and you'll never have to worry about losing Lois. I give you my word on that. Even if you reject me, I'll allow you to take Lois and help you with her, so you two will never have to worry. Lois will have the life you envisioned for her." Her defences broke down, and the brave front that she'd been holding up since Lois was born was shattered. The tears fell down her cheeks. "Really?" she asked again, still in disbelief. "I was so afraid to face you after I saw what you were reading. I thought you would never want to see me again. I can't even believe what you're saying right now. I thought you'd turn me out, and Lois too." "Well, believe it," Samuel laughed, and then crouched down beside her, gripping her hand tighter. "You're so nice. Beth made me a similar offer. They said I could live with them and they'd help me all they could, but it wasn't ideal and I want the very best for her." Mary watched him intently, their gaze interlocked as time slowed. As he leaned in, she closed her eyes and waited. As the tears trickled down her skin, Samuel's soft lips touched hers, sending chills through her body. When the embrace finally ended, she opened her eyes slowly and looked back at him with a smile that she felt would stay on her lips forever. "I'll give you time to think it over. Will you need time to think it over?" "I won't. I've been giving it some thought for a long time." "You have?" She nodded. "I'll marry you, if you're sure." He laughed and hugged her to him. She nuzzled her face into his solid chest. "I am sure, surer than I've ever been about anything." He released her. "When we marry, I will officially be her father, and nobody ever has to know how our little family came to be," Samuel said as he blinked back tears. "We'll tell Lois when she's old enough to understand." "Yes, okay," Mary said, leaning forward, hungry for one more kiss. Samuel stepped back. "I believe I just said, 'I love you.'" Mary giggled. "You did." As Samuel wiped the tears from Mary's face, he asked, "And?" "I love you too," she said with a giggle. Thanks to Samuel, she had a home and a place where she belonged. Lois would have the basic necessities of life and never go to bed hungry. Most of all, Lois would have both a mother and a father who loved her. "You've made me realise there are more joys to life than running a successful business. You and Lois have changed me." Mary could scarcely stop tears from falling. What would she have done if he hadn't come along? She sent up a silent prayer of thanks. She now knew that all things were possible with God. He had shined his light into the darkness of her life, changing it forever. Now, the burden of the secret was lifted, and best of all, she and Lois had a lifetime of happiness in front of them, with Samuel's love to hold their family together. Thank you for listening to The Amish Woman and Her Secret Baby. The Amish Woman and Her Secret Baby. Copyright 2018 by Samantha Price. Production copyright 2026 by Samantha Price.